All right. Good evening. On behalf of the Novi Community School District, I would like to welcome Benjamin Meinke
Very good.
to this interview for the position of superintendent. Mr. Meinke is currently superintendent of Schwartz Creek Community Schools in Schwartz Creek, Michigan. I'll take a few moments to briefly describe our format this evening. The interview may take up to 90 minutes. There will be 23 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give you the opportunity to ask questions of the board and to make a closing statement. We will let you know if time is becoming an issue and there is need to pick up the pace of the responses. Mr. Silverio kind of gives us a chance, and then we also have our timer up there in big,
Okay.
so that you can gauge that as well. For those watching this interview, we welcome your feedback. Those watching virtually may use the link provided for this purpose. Those present may use either the QR code or a paper form which is provided. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as the elected representatives of our community, we value and seriously consider the input of our stakeholders in the process. So we will begin.
Great.
Mr. Meinke, while we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, audience members have not. Please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. There are a lot of reasons that I'm sure I'll get a chance to talk about tonight about why I'm interested specifically in Novi and in this position. I'll start with high school, college, into that area, and do a little personal background, and then I'll get into some of my professional experiences. So I met the most amazing person. My life partner and wife, Jen, is here tonight, and she and I have been married for 20 years, and we are really excited to have 4 beautiful kids. I have a junior in high school, actually junior in high school tomorrow after the last day of school. I will have a 9th grader, and I will also have a 7th grader. All 3 of them are girls. And then the youngest is a boy, Alex, who is going into 4th grade. So we have a lot going on in our house. It's very busy and very fun, but we're a great team. Jen runs a clinical psychology practice in Brighton, where we live, just neighboring community. And we have been friends and experienced a lot of things together. I got really started out in South Lyon Community Schools, which is where I got to be a part of an incredible team. That was my first experience as a teacher. Got our first house there. Jen and I were coaches of the varsity volleyball team at South Lyon High School. I was the varsity track coach, also a varsity basketball coach, and so we had a lot of experience doing that early on in our marriage, and then the kids started to come. And so I had an opportunity to start my administrative career. So from South Lyon, I had the ability, quite frankly, to do a lot of really amazing things as a teacher through Oakland schools, partnered with a lot of people actually in Novi, and got to see a lot of the things happening here in Oakland County. We've lived in the same house for a long time, so I've been very close to Novi as a close neighbor, and I have many friends and close acquaintances that work as professionals and friends in the community and in the school district. I will say that my first opportunity was in Fowlerville schools. I had the opportunity to become a high school assistant principal and did fairly traditional route of administrative, prep. I went to, after a couple years of that, I had the opportunity to be the principal of a middle school there, about 800 students. And after a few years of doing that, I had got a call to apply for the high school principal job in Heartland. So you're probably familiar with Heartland, in the same conference. And so I was the high school principal at Heartland High School, 2,200 students at that building for a while. Also got to collaborate and get to know quite a few people in Novi as well at that time. Little bit non-traditional path happened after a few years there. I was on a board for the Michigan Principals Association, and it was right around the time that a lot of the laws were changing around teacher evaluation, and they were doing a lot of things that they just, quite frankly, needed a lot of support with. So they called me and asked if I'd be willing to take a little bit of a hiatus from the more traditional path And it was one of the most amazing experiences. I had the chance to train thousands of educators all over the state of Michigan. I've been in all the different corners, in the small towns, big towns. I've trained teaching staffs of 1,000 all the way down to 10. And it was just a really incredible experience as I was doing work for the association. After doing that for a few years, I decided that I wanted to take a lot of the work we were doing and apply it in a local context, in a local setting. And there was a great opportunity that presented itself in Swartz Creek. Swartz Creek is a large school district. It's not as large as Novi, but it's scalable, just under 4,000 kids, just north of Fenton area. And had the opportunity to really take off and really spread my wings as a superintendent. I just did my 6th commencement last night in Swartz Creek, and it's been an incredible experience. I just can't say enough about our team, the work that we've been able to accomplish, which I'm sure I'll talk a little bit about tonight. And so as it comes to this point, I've been doing this for 6 years now as a superintendent, and I've been a close neighbor to Novi for a long time. And I've watched, I know a lot about the district. I have worked a lot with Doc Matthews on different boards that I serve on. I know, what an incredible leader he is and what he's meant to this community. And so as I've kind of watched them in their careers and we've collaborated on different projects, it just didn't even really occur to me until obviously recently that this would be a possibility. And I have a lot of tread left on the tires, if you will, and I look at this as an opportunity where I would like to stay until I finish an education. So to me, this is a place that has so much incredible potential. The people are amazing, the district is amazing, and certainly I feel like my skills and abilities are a good match for what Novi needs right now. And I think that when the opportunity presented itself, I talked to our board and I said, I really love what I'm doing here, but this is an opportunity that is just too great to pass up.
Thank you. What are the immediate challenges you would expect to face as our superintendent? Given these, tell us how you would hit the ground running on your first day and be ready to address these challenges.
Well, I think one of the things that is kind of the elephant in the room is that there's a need to get started, and school is out now. And so a lot of our planning is happening in the springtime, it's happening right now. And so obviously this decision and when this decision happens will be imperative in terms of being able to get started. And so one of the first and foremost things that has to be addressed is just making sure that the team is in place and that they have the resources they need to do what they need to do. And so obviously I know there's some cabinet positions, there's possibly some administrative and teaching positions that need to be filled. I understand that the assistant superintendent of academics will be able to start some of that planning for the fall, but that's something that I think is going to be very important to get right into. Having experienced this as a superintendent in a large district, I understand what that takes and what that's going to be like. I tend to also say that people are what we are in the business of, and so I need to get to know all the people, and that is going to take a tremendous amount of energy, and it's actually something that I've done in my current district where I will go out to the neighborhoods in the community all throughout in all 4 corners of the district, excuse me, and what I'll do is I'll hold superintendent book clubs in the summer. And that's a great way for me to put names to faces of individuals. I will do that right away because, again, hitting the ground running is that people understand who the superintendent is and what I'm about. So we'll start our reading clubs in the summer. I'll get right out there into the communities, and what we try and do is stage. We just usually grab a tent, and we get, usually I'll try and grab a principal if they're available or a few teachers, and we'll go out and we'll read some books, and we'll invite the members in that area to come. And it's just a great visual face-to-face. There's a number of staff that are going to work throughout the school or throughout the summer, so I want to make sure I get to know them as well. But also getting around as school is starting and making those connections with every individual that works in the district. That seems like a daunting task, but I do have in my plan, which I'll share with you before I'm done tonight, I will have a conversation with every single person in the district within the first 6 months on the job. And that conversation consists of what are they passionate about, what do they love about Novi Community School District, and what do they think we can work on to be better. And those things I have with every single person that is employed by the district or is that we've hired. And that really just kind of sets the tone for an ongoing relationship, very relational in that capacity. So as it stands in terms of hitting the ground running, it's about getting to know the people, obviously making sure that the plans are in place and the resources are in place to start school. And then drawing on my background and experience as an experienced superintendent of what it's going to take to get school kicked off properly.
Thank you. Given your research on our district, what do you believe are the 2 or 3 most critical long-term priorities we will need to address? And how would your background and skills help us address these priorities?
Sure. Well, Novi is a very high-achieving school district. And I think when you look at those numbers, that's something to celebrate, and that's something we want to continue. One of the challenges, though, is when you look into the subgroups and you start to analyze, how are we doing for all students, that's going to be something that's going to take some ongoing work and rolling up our sleeves and really looking at what is it going to take so that every single child is successful. And that's going to be some intentional work. And so we're going to look at data, we're going to look at our practices, and we're going to determine if what we're doing is equitable across every student group that we serve, and making sure that every child has what they need. So I think as it relates to long-term challenges, it's going to be about keeping the bar where it's set and then pushing it further. But I think it would be remiss if I didn't talk about one thing that is extremely important to me. I'm pursuing my PhD in organizational psychology. And the way that our kids are dealing with mental health in this particular environment is incredibly important. We've seen the tragedy that just happened in Texas, that just happened in Oxford. The kids in Novi are under a lot of pressure. They're high achieving, and that's wonderful, and we want to continue to support that. But they also need to be supported in their social emotional health and well-being. And so some of the long-term concerns that I would have is in those high-pressure situations, in those high-pressure districts, we need to make sure that we're providing the appropriate mental health supports to our kids. That's something in my district I've also felt is critical. And so one of the things that we've done over the past 6 years, we've increased our social work support by over 300%. We have multiple social workers in every building. We just cleared the way in our budget to hire another one next year, so we'll have multiple at some of our secondary buildings. We've also increased counseling services and support. But it's not just about who the district employs for those goals and challenges. It's also about who are our partners in our community. Really excited about the partners that Novi has in the community themselves, but also the opportunities to expand those partnerships to provide a really robust mental health network for our kids and making sure that they're healthy in that. So I think obviously academic achievement, keeping that bar high, long term, and I also think the social emotional well-being of the kids is going to be something that can oftentimes get missed in a high pressure situation.
Thank you. What specific qualities and capabilities do you bring to this position that may set you apart from others?
So I've been the benefactor of tremendous mentors. And I have to say that I've just had a lot of people invest in me in my career, and I've tried to, take from all of them the things that I believe will make for a successful leader. Some of the experiences that I've had, to just highlight a couple, I was given the opportunity to go out to the University of Washington in Seattle and train in the Center of Educational Leadership. That was part of my training that I did to come back and really teach administrators and teachers about the 5 dimensions of teaching and learning. Through that process, I developed a lot of national colleagues, and so I regularly collaborate not just with my Michigan peers, but also with superintendents across the United States. With that, it's opened up other doors. As a legislative liaison, I've been had the ability to be very active in Lansing, I've had the opportunity to testify in front of House and Senate Education Committees. I've had the opportunity to be a part of writing legislation and advocating on behalf of public schools in Michigan. I've been out to Washington, D.C. to advocate at the Legislative Advocacy Conference. I sit on numerous state boards in terms of, I'm on the executive board for K-12 Alliance, which represents the superintendents and students from Oakland, Genesee, which is where I'm at, St. Clair, Wayne, and Macomb counties. I also sit on the statewide association executive board at the Michigan Association of School Administrators. I currently teach a course it's built to train and teach new and aspiring superintendents. So what I do is I work with assistant superintendents or maybe principals, and I help them work towards their certification in central office administration. And so I have cohorts every year of some of my colleagues that have been able to move on and obtain superintendencies as well. So that's been a tremendous experience for me. But I think probably the thing that sets me apart and makes me just a little bit different is my relational capacity. I think I have the ability to be very balanced. I see myself as a unifier. And what I mean by that is that I look at a situation and I find that I have the ability to take a variety of different perspectives and help people come around a common goal and vision. I see that as something that as a district that you would look for and that you would be liking to have come into the district. So while I have a number of qualities that I believe professionally set me apart, I think the way that I lead, I'm very systematic and intentional about how I do that, and I think that that sets me apart on top of being a superintendent of a large district for 6 years. And it's difficult to explain to people that haven't sat in the chair. We've been through a lot. I've been through a lot of fires, as I know you probably have as board members as well. And it's been an opportunity that I cherish and that I love. I learn all the time. But I do think that those are some things that probably sets me apart and make me an ideal candidate for this job.
Thank you. Thank you for that. If you need to take a minute to have some water, we are going to move on to Trustee Cook, who has a few questions to ask you.
Thank you.
Okay, maintaining healthy relationships with schools and community stakeholders is important to the Board of Education. Please share with us how you've gone about building and maintaining successful relationships with all members of the school community.
It's a great question. I think in Novi that's particularly important. You have a lot of very active and involved, not just parents, but also affinity groups and community organizations. That's fantastic, and I think those are groups that need to continue to be leveraged to be able to help move the district forward. So in my current role, I sit on our local chamber, Kiwanis, Lions Club, Rotary Club, trying to think if there's any other student organizations. I mentioned chamber, our foundations, and then I also work a lot with the Mott Foundation and some of our other children's hospital that's in Flint area. I do a lot of work with outreach because those wraparound supports with our community partners can be vital. In terms though of our in-district stakeholders, I think, as I think about parents want to know and trust that they have a voice and that you're accessible. I'm exceedingly accessible. And so what I've done, anytime we have something that's coming up in terms of a new issue or initiative, I make myself available, and we have oftentimes town hall meetings. Through the pandemic, a lot of people were really concerned. What are we going to do? How are we going to navigate this? Or even I just like to share some concerns that I have about the things that the district's doing. And so what I did is I would open myself up, and I would usually ask another couple staff members, teachers, administrators, and we would go on, and we've had 700, 800, 900 participants on online town hall meetings that we would hold, and they were open forum. And sometimes that's a dangerous place to be, but I think that that's actually really important because it allows a level of transparency and openness to the community. And that is something that I just value in such a large way. And so when I think about our parent groups and making sure that they're engaged, that's really important. We've transitioned now to doing some of our town hall meetings in person. Oftentimes I'm encouraging board members to attend or to be a part of that, you know, I mean, you guys have a lot of meetings, but it's awesome when we can have board members participate in those as well, because I think it gives the parents an opportunity to see you, you know, in a little bit of a different perspective other than just sitting up there behind the table. So that's a way that I've engaged parents in a meaningful way. And then I'll close by saying the most important group of people that we serve are our children, our students. And I make that a priority to be with kids. So I spend about 30% of my time, and I'll just start by saying I have a very systematic approach to the way that my calendar is laid out. And so my administrative assistant will tell you that it's very regimented, but I'm insistent that at least 30% of my time is spent out into either buildings or in community functions and events. And so I'm in the buildings a lot, and that would be the case here as well. We also engage our students. We have added, since I've been there, a student board representative. They have an opportunity to come to the board table and share updates and ongoing happenings that are going on. I've engaged our board in student board roundtable discussions, where I actually ask the board members and students to get into small groups and discuss things that are going on at the middle school and high school. I've done board tours, where I've helped board members actually go into buildings and we kind of take a look at some things that are going on in the classrooms. And all of those things happen, you know, throughout the week, but I'm very, very active in involving our kids and hearing their voice, because student voice is incredibly important. And I think sometimes we move forward saying, you know, we're going to make these decisions, and you know, they're the kids. And while some of that's true, they often have insights that are incredibly profound. And so engaging students in a meaningful way is something I also think is very important. And quite frankly, I think that Doc Matthews has done a great job of that. And I think it's something that we need to continue.
Thank you. How do you think various stakeholders, such as parents, staff members, and community members, should be involved in the planning process and setting the direction of the district?
Well, you all are the elected representatives to make those decisions. And so you are the fiduciary of the school district. And my role is, I'm your employee. And my role is to support you in being amazing board members and being able to do the roles that you need to have and to function. I don't believe that you would want to do that in isolation without community and parent support. And so I'm a huge proponent of making sure that parents are involved in those decisions. We're wrapping up a comprehensive strategic planning process where we engaged parents and community members, business leaders, foundation heads, and other community stakeholders, as well as students, as well as our staff, and all different levels of staff. I actually care a lot about what our custodial staff thinks, or our transportation staff, and I want to know what they have to say about the direction that things are going. It's also important that our teachers have voice, and as I said before, our students as well. So I know you asked the question about parents. They're a part of that, but I do believe that you are the elected officials that have to make the decision ultimately on the direction of the district. But my job is to make sure that you're getting information that's accurate, that's up to date, and that you have the best amount of data and information with which to make decisions that are vital to the success of the district. So you'll see me as very active in providing you with a lot of information from what I'm hearing from different parent groups, from buildings, and I do a lot of board communication so that you are equipped to know what's going on there. And I've mentioned a few things before, a lot of the town hall meetings, and you know, I've had coffees with the superintendent and those types of things where we're inviting parents to these events, and I encourage board members to attend in a more informal capacity as well.
Thank you. Effective and timely communication is vital to the success of the school district. Please describe the type of communication students, staff, parents, and the board should expect to receive from you.
So I am somewhat active on Twitter, and that's a reality of our world. Social media is something that happens quicker than an email does, right? So with the board, I'll just kind of start start with you guys. On Monday morning, and of course, this is all open to change because my goal is really to make it so that it's meaningful and useful for you. But what I do currently with my board is I have multiple outlets. Number one, on Monday morning, I have a regular update with a building activity report so that they know what's going on in all the buildings, right? So you might say, I'd love to attend an ice cream social, at Deerfield Elementary School. You can do that. I'll make sure that you have that on your Monday memo, as well as several other things to make sure that I'm updating you on, upcoming events and dates. We had a situation recently, as many districts have, with threats that have been ongoing with the school shootings and things like that. Text message threads instantly going to the board so that you guys are aware that there's an issue going on. We had an ambulance come to a building. I want to make sure you're informed, and you're not hearing, from the grocery store something that happened before you hear it from me. So you're going to hear a very quick and fast, immediate text communication in those situations. And then, of course, we have phone conversations and things of that nature, but I also establish a one-on-one meeting with every board member. And what that's all about is collectively, when you come to the board table, you have to act as the governing board and make decisions. But I actually care about, and I hope you care about, getting to know me personally, and I want to get to know you personally, but also from a business perspective, it's helpful for me to understand your vision for the district and your priorities, because then I can help each of you advocate to the greater board as a whole. And so that can look a variety of ways. Some of my board members like to just come to the office once a month. Some of them they have a particular coffee or breakfast place or a lunch place that they like to go to. Sometimes they like to go to a building and do a little field trip, and we'll have our meeting in a building. But the point is, I make it a point every month to have a one-on-one meeting with every board member. And why that's super important is because it allows me to have a better context of what's happening, and we get that face-to-face interaction. And so that's something that's been tremendously successful in being able to build those connections with the board and help us all operate as a team, because we have to operate as a single unit, because we are going to ultimately, the research is clear, board and superintendent relationships have a huge impact on student achievement. And so that's an area that I think is really important from a communication standpoint. Relative to the students, well, you may know that I communicate with kids via social media. We communicate with kids online, and we have made some videos and things like that with kids, and we involve the kids in that process. In addition to that, we, with students, have a lot of opportunities where they get to kind of speak to me. And so I have a regular superintendent advisory meeting. It's a monthly meeting with students. They're represented by our upper elementary students is kind of one group, and then my middle and high school students are in a different group. And I meet with them regularly, and we've developed some great relationships. I ask them to tell me what's actually happening, right? Because if you ask them, they will tell you. And so that is something that's been really refreshing, to have that type of communication and open communication. And it allows the kids to see me in a way that's relatable, and I think that's important. So parents, of course, in community, we have a hard print newsletter. I'm sure that you guys have something similar to that as well, that we send out on a quarterly basis. We actually have partnered with our marketing liaison to do some work with MLive, and so we do a lot of actual hard and soft media blitzes and things to kind of get the good word out about registrations or great events that we're doing in the district. And then, of course, parents get regular communication from me via email, and then if there's a school closing or something like that, if it's not a video, they're going to get a text message or an email of some sort. So communication has to come in multiple forms, and I believe it needs to be timely, clear, and concise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook, and thank you. We'll give you a chance to take a breather again, and then we are going to move on to Trustee Hood.
Thank you. Excuse me. As our superintendent, how would you advocate for political action that benefits our district and public education throughout our state?
So this is an area that I briefly touched on earlier, and currently I'm the Genesee County Legislative Chairperson. There are 21 districts in Genesee County, and I'm the chairperson for the Legislative Committee. I also mentioned my involvement in K-12 Alliance on their executive board, as well as the MASA Board of Directors. Why those are important is because oftentimes I have the opportunity to advocate and sit at the table with legislators, whether they're senators, representatives, or even the governor, to be able to talk about priorities that are important to Novi and also public schools and kids across Michigan. I think 15, 20 years ago, superintendents probably didn't have to be at those tables, but the reality is that schools have gotten much more political. And even though you're a local control district here in Michigan, there's still a lot of things that are thrust upon us from Lansing. And if the school superintendents are not active in advocating for kids and for local school districts in Lansing, then more and more things happen to us without us having a voice in those decisions. And so I think it's actually critically important that the superintendent be actively involved. I actually had the opportunity, and you may be familiar, I actually went to Washington to advocate for the state equalization funds, which ended up being received. My current district did not receive those funds, but Novi did. They're the 11T funds, and that was critically important. And because a lot of the ways that the COVID relief dollars were distributed, schools like Novi were not going to be able to get at least a baseline amount of money to be able to support many of the things that your students still need. And so I had an opportunity to be a part of speaking with the federal government in that case. And that's just one example of many. So I do believe that being active legislatively is something that I'm very comfortable with, and it's something that I intend to do. And I will also keep you very well informed because I'm very comfortable in that space. I'm gonna say things to you like, here are some bills that are on the floor, here are some things that have some legs and possibly gonna go through. I will engage our local representatives and senators as well, and making sure that they're aware of who we are and what our priorities are. And there may be times where I pull you aside individually and I ask you, what your position that you'd like me to take would be as the superintendent of Novi. And that's another part that those open relationship and communication help. So I can't overstate enough how important that role is in today's context.
Thank you. Superintendents are often faced with the challenge of making decisions when there is no clear right answer, and members of the community are split on the right path forward. Talk about a time when you were faced with a difficult decision where you knew there would be a group of people unhappy with your decision, whichever way you decided. How did you go about making that decision and getting people on board with the direction you determined was best?
So do you want me to talk about today, yesterday, or superintendents are faced with these decisions daily. It's interesting because you do have to be very diplomatic in this role. I think it's important that people feel heard, that people feel as though you're a good listener. It's important that everybody have a voice, but ultimately decisions are made, and sometimes there are going to be people that are unhappy. I'll give you a couple things come to mind. I mean, certainly I could talk about COVID and a lot of the things that happened with that, and people that were unhappy with different things. I will say that ultimately through COVID we did very well. We actually ran 3 unique schools, which is challenging for 4,000 people to get all of those oars rowing in the same direction, but we based our approach on parent choice. And so during the pandemic, other than the times that we had to be shut down because of safety and all of those other types of things, we had about 65% of our kids attending face-to-face every day. We also ran a hybrid, and then we ran a full virtual program. And we ran all 3 of those and gave parents the opportunity to select what was the best situation for their particular child. And so when we went through that process, while there was people who were frustrated by different things that were outside of our control, they at least appreciated that the district were giving parents that opportunity to advocate on what was best for their child. Another example that I can speak to, and I want to be careful how I say this but it was very important. There was a particular situation involving a staff member, and that person was a longtime staff member that was beloved by many. And there were some things that happened that were unethical and inappropriate. And I had to be faced with not saying those things because of the nature of confidentiality. Yet that person is no longer with our organization. But that was incredibly hard because I had to maintain confidentiality, and I also had to deal with the fact that my job first and foremost is to advocate for kids and to do the right thing. And I will always do that, even when it's hard. And that was a situation that was very difficult in my current role. And then one more that just pops to mind, because I think you're looking for those big situations. We had a community building in our town that was a historic building. It was a very old building. We were occupying it, and essentially the fire marshal said, you have to get out. It's not safe for you to be in there anymore. It had just deteriorated to a point where we could not be in there anymore. And you can imagine there are, 50% of the people are saying, good, tear it down, it's time to move on. And 50% of the people are saying, but my dad went to school there, and it's such a part of our community. And so you can't go into those things lightly. You can't just cavalierly go in and say, we're gonna do this or that. You actually have to be really thoughtful about that. So what we did is we found an immediate solution for the people that were meeting in that building to meet somewhere else. And then we engaged some community partners that actually take old historic buildings and turn them into usable community assets. And that ended up being a great experience because what we ended up doing is getting our community involved. They got a chance to have voice. We did, again, multiple town hall meetings. We brought people out to talk through, what would they like to see done with the site. We considered all of those avenues, and then we were able to make a decision. And I think this might be a good time, just quickly, when we make decisions that are hard, and this comes from my background in psychology and the work that I do there, every human being associates change or a difficult decision from a certain perspective. And so it's important that for the people that need data, right, they believe that all decisions just need to show me the data and that's the decision, right? There are people that believe, it's really about how this decision makes me feel that's the most important. And then you have some people who would say, well, I just am more analytical and I want to know all the pros and cons. It's important, and I have a decision-making matrix that I go through on these difficult things, especially when they're more public, where we start to say, do the people that need the data have what they need? Do the people that are feelers, do they have what they need to be able to feel as though the decision is honoring what they need? Do the people who are more analytical have the information that they need to make a decision on what's best and all the pros and cons and here, there? So the point is, when we make those difficult decisions, we're very intentional with how we make sure that everyone involved is getting what they need to feel as though their processing modality is honored.
Thank you. Please share specific ways that our district should work with other districts to support learning for all students.
Well, one thing I can say is that you guys do a great job of that right now. So I actually had the opportunity about 5 years ago, I came over to look at a lot of your flexible seating spaces, and you guys have some incredible work that you've been doing in that arena. I'm a huge fan of inter-district collaboration, and that would be something that I would champion if I were the superintendent here. So some things that I've done in my current role, Fenton Schools and us, we have been doing a lot with teacher labs, where we actually had a research-based process where teachers were able to see other teachers and practitioners going about their work, and then they have an opportunity to reflect and think about how they could apply that to their classroom practice. We were doing that individually, and we just got together and said, the superintendent and I said, could we do something like this where they actually could see your teachers doing that and then vice versa? And so we did somewhat of a teacher swap with our teacher labs, and so our teachers got to see them teach, we got to see what they were doing, and it was really, really powerful. And from that came a lot of additional collaborations in the future, where they were able to say, look, now I have a connection to somebody who's a colleague, in another community, and we're able to do that. We have presented as a district at the National Science Teachers, conference. We have a tremendous STEM program. In fact, and I'm very excited about the Roar Center and a lot of the things that you're doing here, because that marries very nicely to what we're doing in our district. We're building the single largest STEAM facilities for a local public school in our region. And so that's a huge investment that our community is making in that. And so what we've done is our teachers at the upper levels have really worked on modeling, and they've actually gone out to present a lot of the work that they're doing. We have partnerships with Kettering University in that arena, and that allows for our kids to be able to go right into engineering fields and technology fields with college credit. So we've had a lot of inter-school partnerships and presentations at those other types of things. And then we've also been involved, our MTSS program is nationally and statewide known, which are multi-tiered systems of support. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that acronym, but there's a lot of acronyms in education. So that particular process, Swartz Creek is known for, and so we have people from all over the state. We were awarded by the state of Michigan as a gold school for that, and so that's something that we do a lot. So those are examples of things that I have done, but I think that it's really important for a school district like Novi, who is doing so many great things, so many innovative things, to share that with other people, because you can benefit not just the kids here, which of course is our primary focus, but you can also share that with other districts that, you know, would impact and leverage other kids in other districts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another breather? I'm
It's
gonna,
helpful having this clock, so I
good,
gotta know if I need to slow down or go faster.
that's good. We want you to be comfortable.
Yeah.
We're gonna move on to trustee Mena.
Hey, good evening. What is the most difficult decision that you've had to deal with in your educational career, and how was it resolved?
Well, I kind of shared, a few things here just about the staff member that I had to deal with, and so I think I'll go back to that. It resolved itself through the litigative process, of which, of course, I can't speak about, but I will say that I had to do a lot of homework, and it wasn't just investigative homework, it was also homework with the people who were involved and the stakeholders who were involved. And that particular situation didn't end in a real positive outcome, but I will tell you that the process earned a tremendous amount of respect and people that saw that we were going to do the right thing no matter what, and that makes a big difference when you're trying to build capacity and relationships and trust in your community. And so that's something that I personally had to deal with and attend to. But you're asking about the hardest thing as an educator. I think a lot of cliche answers would be something around COVID, because I think that's been the hardest stretch for probably most people in their educated careers at this point. But one of the things that I think tops it all is when you lose a student. We had a student who just a couple years ago was diagnosed with a rare form of childhood cancer, and she came to us and said, her mother actually came to us and said, you know, she's in 10th grade and she's probably not going to make it beyond the year, and her only wish is to graduate. And so that was the one thing that she wanted to do. And so it's hard to talk with a parent who's losing a child, but the coolest thing happened. So I talked about a negative outcome, talk about a positive one. She was able to, we actually planned a full-scale graduation just for her. We had speakers, we did a little video, and we got donations from the American Cancer Society. We raised enough funds to set up a scholarship in her name. We raised enough funds to pay for the funeral and all of the expenses that her family couldn't pay for. But most importantly, that little girl got her diploma. And it was an opportunity where, you know, sometimes we can talk about things that are, you know, difficult decisions. Those are things that happen all the time. I mean, we all deal with difficult decisions. In this particular role, that's just a part of the job. And usually they're adult things. But when you're dealing with a situation like that, it's just really, really challenging. And so it was a great experience to honor her in that way. And so that was one of the more difficult things I had to deal with as I got to know the parent and the student pretty closely. And that's happened a few times in my career.
Thank you. What are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and the board?
Well, I have a few rules and guidelines that I kind of set forth as I work with the board. Number one, I'm never going to ever tell you as a board member how you should vote. I don't believe that that's my role at all. Obviously, you're going to know that I'm going to advocate for certain things. You're going to know that I'm going to want to give you counsel and advice. But my role is not to cast a vote, and it's not to try and influence a vote. My goal is to give you the information with which to make the best decision. And I also don't expect that votes are always going to be 7-0. I actually think that it's healthy when a board has respectful dialogue. The next thing that I always say to board members is that I'm not going to talk negatively about another board member to another board member. So I think it's really critical that, I'm not going to say something about someone else in a negative light, because that just erodes trust. And the other thing is that confidentiality is critical. So when we have conversations, there are things that you'll need to tell me that need to be confidential. There are things that you'll need to be able to tell me that can be shared. But with those three basic principles, we've been able to establish tremendous trust and relationships with our board. They're able to effectively operate, and they don't all think the same way. I think that would be a real negative if everybody on the board had the exact same mindset. It's actually beneficial to have diversity of thought and ideas. So with that being said, though, how do we have dialogue and engage respectfully in those situations? And so part of my role is to help you as board members be as effective as possible. You have to know that you can trust me when you tell me something is confidential, and you also have to know that I'm never going to tell you how to vote, and I'm never going to talk negatively about another board member. And when we have those ground rules established, it makes for a very positive working relationship, and it allows me to better advocate for you and for the whole board.
Thank you. How do you inspire and engage the entire school community in support of the district vision and mission?
Well, I think there's ways that are real textbook that you can talk about, making that visible on displays and entries and all of those other types of things. But I think it's really about getting after the core of what you're trying to accomplish. So I think the ways that you can do that is, number one, I think involving as many people as possible. So when I talk about students, when we talk about our vision with our kids, we're talking a lot about, what do they see their future being, and what is the culmination of their experience as a student in our district. And they get pretty excited when they get to speak into that. And then we take that information and we share it out at a board meeting, or we get other stakeholder groups to be a part of it. I think another piece that I mentioned a little bit earlier is making sure that our partners are a part of that process. So when we do strategic planning and you're establishing your mission, your vision, your goals, that you're getting input from a variety of stakeholder groups. If there's 7 or 8 people that make that plan up without any other input, it's going to be very difficult for people to get excited about that vision. And so you want your vision to come alive, and the way that you do that is by participative leadership. You allow others to be able to weigh in and be a part of that. And then, in terms of getting excited about things, I've got a lot of energy, and so what you're going to see is that whatever it is that we're doing as a district, I'm going to be a huge champion and ambassador for. I will be an ambassador in Lansing, as I said. I'll be an ambassador in the community. I'm going to be out there really just championing our school district's efforts. And Jen will tell you, I spend a lot of time in the district because that's what it takes to make sure that I'm visible and approachable, and that people know what our vision and mission is, and that I'm able to be out there and engaging the community.
Thank you. We will move on now to Trustee Murphy.
Okay, so question number 14. No, we're over halfway through that. I just thought I'd announce that.
Perfect.
What experience and success have you had with closing the achievement gap for economically disadvantaged and minority students?
It's a great question. In my current district, we have several buildings that are actually at or above the 50% free and reduced lunch threshold. So working with children in poverty has been emphasis for our particular district. We actually work with the Michigan Economic Coalition, and we brought them in to do some training with our staff. And sometimes it's just about addressing bias, and it's addressing, what our current backgrounds are, and then how certain things we may say, act, do with kids have an impact in their ability to not only understand content, but how it makes them feel about being in school, right? And so we had them come in. It was a huge training. It was great. They took us through multiple simulations. We've also done a lot of work with Ruby Payne and her work on poverty, and so that has been a baseline for that. Now I will tell you that we as a district, our primary focus in our MyKit goals has been trauma-informed care. And a lot of students that you may be familiar with, if you're familiar with adverse childhood experiences and the ACEs test, there's a lot of work that can be done around looking at trauma and how that impacts a learner in the classroom. And oftentimes, if you look at the great equalizer across, if you look across all the demographic subgroups, when you look at poverty, that is one where we're continually seeing students performing below where they need to perform. And so we've done a number of things. So on top of all of those trainings and things like that we do with our staff, we actually are very intentional about what we do in our community. We took a school bus, and instead of selling it on auction for $5,000, we converted it into a food truck, and it's called the Dragon Diner. And we take that into our community, and we feed kids in the summer that otherwise are missing out on school lunch. And so we did Universal's free lunch program the last couple of years, but we're always looking at those other types of ways that we can support kids, because if they're hungry in school, they're not going to be able to study and be successful. Blessings in a Backpack is another one. We send kids home that, and we work with our community partners on this, and they help us basically stuff backpacks with canned goods and toiletries and food supplies that they need, and they take that backpack home. It's pretty inconspicuous. They take it home, and then they have supplies for the weekend, and we do that on Fridays. And so those are ways that we've addressed the achievement gap with that particular subgroup. And what we have seen is that gap has closed substantially. It grew during the pandemic. We're proud to say that this year we're seeing it tighten again. During the pandemic, a lot of those resources and supports were so hard to get to families. And so we've been more successful this year in being able to do that again and getting back on track. But those are just a few areas that we've worked with our families that are underserved and in situations where they need some additional support.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. Please give us examples of educational change or reform you have initiated in your career that have led to improvements in student learning.
So I kind of go back to the work that I did at the University of Washington. Our district has implemented a fully research-based and vetted instructional framework. You have one here. You use Marzano. We use the five dimensions of teaching and learning. But the point is that what we look at as our instructional framework is what the research says will have the most impact on student learning. And so we utilize that in our conversations with teachers and our conversations with principals, and we start asking questions about, are our practices bathed in research, or is this something that, we just kind of came out of thin air? No, they have to be bathed in research, and so that's why we look at that instructional framework. And so I've had tremendous success in being able to close achievement gaps and also improve student outcomes by getting our staff aligned and using a framework with fidelity. And that is really important. It doesn't really matter what the framework is. I mean, it does to a certain extent, but for example, with Marzano, which you guys have, if the teachers all understand that and they understand how to implement those practices with fidelity, then great things are going to happen because that's a research-based tool. What oftentimes happens is there's a framework put out there and then it's just kind of ad hoc. There's not any fidelity of implementation. So I'm very systematic in my approach to those types of things, and that's made a big difference. Other educational initiatives, I'll just highlight a couple. With our special needs population, we've done a lot of work around least restrictive environment and setting up consultation teams within our buildings. So really addressing our students that need additional supports and how are we making sure that they're getting those supports. And so teachers have been freed up from certain classrooms to be able to push in and do some additional supports with those students. We've seen tremendous improvements in that subgroup as well. Obviously, I mentioned trauma-informed care, which is something that we've been doing, and we've done tremendous curricular alignment with our competency-based education. And so what we do is we start with what is the profile of your graduate? Essentially, what competencies do they need to be a successful adult and participate in industry, participate in college, have an opportunity to really be a successful adult, and you backwards design then all the way down to kindergarten. Where do those competencies start, and how do we make sure that they're aligned all the way through the curriculum to 12th grade? And then, of course, the outcome is if we're able to be successful K-12, then by the time they graduate, they're competent in all of those areas that we set forth. And that's been hugely beneficial in our ability to get teachers to collaborate around that and get consistent with what they're doing with their practices.
Thank you. Oops. Okay, how would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high-quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
Well, college and career readiness is really important. I think it's especially important in Novi. You have a lot of very high-achieving schools or students. I was reading about, your national merit scholar list, and it's impressive. And so we should value that, and we should continue to champion high achievement. I don't think that that's something we want to move away from. I've done a lot of work with our AP curriculum. We've looked at international baccalaureate curricula as well, and we've been able to open up more opportunities for kids. And I think that's where I would center my focus. A lot of times what happens is we're just not creating opportunities, which is an equity issue, right? So if we talk about how are we ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to take some of these high caliber courses, we need to make sure that we're making those opportunities available. So we were awarded by College Board in our district an award for opening up opportunities and access to more kids to be able to take AP curriculum at our high school, and that's been tremendously successful for creating a college level student that's ready to go in with college credit. And it also helps them financially if they can get 4s and 5s on those tests, and then they're taking those credits into college. So I think that's important. But I think the second part of your question was how do you also support career readiness? Is that part of it? So we are dealing with in our country the largest number of unemployed individuals with bachelor's degree in our history. And I believe that part of that is the schools probably could do more to make sure that they're matching students with jobs that are actually available. I think if we think about STEM and the work that we're doing in that area, and I know that you guys in Novi are doing with robotics and everything else, that's really important because those are jobs that are available and that are going to be in place. So we want to do a better job of helping kids know don't just go immediately to college and then flounder around and just settle for something. It's not only a lot of money, but you might not be getting yourself trained in a job that's actually going to be fruitful and you'll be able to be employable. So how do we help make those career tracks more visible to kids and help get them connected to those? I also think for some students, and I will tell this story just real briefly, we had a student who struggled with math in particular, struggled with high school geometry, and so we got him involved in an apprenticeship program that was a welding program, and he, as an 18-year-old, left high school, graduated from high school, got his diploma, and he is actually drilling on underwater oil rigs in Texas, making more money than a lot of people do. And so the reality was, for him, his parents didn't think he was even going to get a high school diploma, but we were able to find something that ignited his passion. And I think that's what this is all about, is being able to connect kids with career pathways or with college pathways that are aligned to what they're passionate about and help them make those connections, early. And sometimes kids aren't ready to make that decision. I mean, even 18, 19, 20-year-olds aren't ready to make those decisions, but giving them more opportunities to understand what the market looks like and then helping them make wise decisions on that point is really important. So it's a both and. You have to continue to push and create opportunities for the top achieving students. You need to create equity and opportunity for all students to have access to those, but you also have to make sure that you're creating other outlets and avenues to say, maybe, going to a four-year college is not the best situation for you. Maybe it is after you take a year off and figure out what you want to do, but let's help you and make those wise decisions.
Okay. Next question. What is the biggest risk you have taken to do what's right for children?
I think a lot of the work that we're doing around equity would fit that bill. I think equity has created kind of a buzz or a sense of unfortunate political dynamic that doesn't really need to exist, but we've made some concerted efforts to really take a look at our students and making sure that everybody understands, whether they're a teacher, an adult, anyone in the system, that every single child has a unique experience. Every single child comes from a unique background, and they're going to have certain things and supports that need to be in place for them to be successful. It's really quite simply that simple. And when we understand that everyone has a story and everyone has a particular background, it leads us to have further conversations about what needs to be done in that area. I also think that in those issues, which can be somewhat dangerous and divisive and can create controversy, it's important to think about values, because values are universally positive, right? So we probably agree that the value of perseverance, or the value of equality, or the value of everybody having a fair opportunity are things that we can agree to. And so I like to start conversations that are tough like that with those types of value conversations, because beliefs are pretty unchanging. But we can come together and come to some consensus around what we value. And I believe that all of us are here for kids, and that's why we're in this room tonight. And so when we're there for kids, then we can have those conversations. But there's a lot of political pressures and things that are being said that are not happening, some things that are, and I take a fairly neutral approach to that. One specific example of that, and I don't know how much of a risk this is, but I'll just explain it because it's a very systematic approach. So there's a lot of research that supports that our staff, and one of your goals actually is to create a culturally competent and diverse staff. And that's great, because there's a lot of research that supports that the students who see themselves in the professional educators that service them achieve better. It's actually a student achievement strategy. And so I believe that that's important to look at that research and to say, what are we doing to diversify our workforce? When I came to Creek, there were 2 staff members who were minority staff members. We service about 22% students of color, and we were clearly not represented in our 500 employees with 2 individuals, right? And so I believe first and foremost that when we hire the best candidate available, period, right? However, I believe that districts oftentimes make a fatal mistake. They either err on this issue by saying, we're only looking to hire a minority candidate because we want to make sure that that's the person that we put into the role, or they say it's not an issue and we're going to pretend that that doesn't exist, right? And so you've got these 2 ends of the spectrum, and neither one is where you want to be. So what we've decided to do is systematically, we believe that the pool is where you diversify your workforce. So what we have done is we've made very intentional efforts. We've had relationships with Jackson State University and several other places where we know that we're going to be able to find candidates who are ready to come, and we need to make them feel welcome to come, right? And we work on getting them in our pools. Now, once they're in the pool, as I said, we hire the best candidate possible, right? But if you constantly go through a process and you're not having any candidates of color in your pool, well then you're not really you're not giving yourself a chance to move the needle on that issue. So the way that we've done that systematically in our district, proud to say over the past 6 years, we're not where we need to be, but we've improved that by 700%. We now have 16 individuals. Most recently was a central office executive director of human resources. We've got administrators, we've got teachers, and in every single case, they were the best candidate in the pool. But we worked to make sure that the pools were diversified, and so having that conversation with people is a risk, because people think that it's something that it's not. We're not trying to make one particular group more important than another. We're just simply saying, we're looking at research and we're taking a systematic approach to how we deal with it.
Thank you. All right, question 18. What do you believe are currently the biggest challenges with special education in our region, and how should these challenges be addressed?
There's a lot of debate, and I mentioned least restrictive environment, right? And so there's kind of this growing debate in the community of special education where, you know, they believe, so one side believes that all students need to be in specialized programs all day. The research is actually contrary to that, which says that those students, wherever possible, need to be in the least restrictive environment, meaning that we need to get them into classes and have opportunities that all students have access to, and that is also an equity issue. So as it relates to special education, I think that particular debate is raging, you know, extremely hard. Now, one of the things that I've been involved in, this gets back to Trustee Hood's question, which is advocacy, because districts are not fully funded as it relates to IDEA. And so you might have a student who we are obligated, and quite frankly, we always should give kids what they need to be successful. But some kids may cost them upwards of 6 figures to educate, depending on the type of special services that they require. And so it's very difficult for a school district to be able to maintain that level of support without being fully funded. So we did a lot of work. I believe that Novi was a part of the districts like mine that supported a resolution to fully fund IDEA. And that's another thing that I think is going to continue to be an ongoing issue in special education, to make sure that we're advocating for proper funding, because those children deserve to have an incredible educational experience just like all children do. And so I think that's going to be important. And then I think it's going to be really interesting to see the Adult Transition Center here in Novi and how that's flourishing and growing. I'm really excited to hear about you know that you're doing that and opening up the center just across the parking lot here, and I think that's really going to be impactful. Not every district has that opportunity, and I think it's going to be a real highlight for Novi schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Trustee Roney.
I get finance.
All right.
Please describe your experience with budget, development, and financial management. What is the largest budget you have built and maintained?
Well, it got larger with ESSER 3 funds, so I guess I'll use that number. So currently, we manage about a $45 million budget, and I know Novi's is in the mid-80s, but I do think that it's scalable. We have really enjoyed trying to figure out how to become really proactive in our business practices. So every superintendent at some point in their career most likely has had to come to the point where they've had to make tough decisions on budget cuts and things like that, and what we would recommend to the board. And I think it's important to note that the board, ultimately, one of your primary functions is to establish the budget. And so my role is to help you be wise about what those things are and then put your priorities into that budget. But as I've developed budgets, one of the things that I've loved is a zero-based budgeting approach. And what that means is, when I started, a lot of times the budgets were just rolled over from year to year. And it's kind of a lazy, easy way to do it, just to say, well, what do we spend this year? Let's just put that in the budget for next year. And instead, a more intentional approach is to say, what are the board's priorities? And where do we want to make sure that we put our funds first, right? And so we put those things in the budget first, and then we build around, because if you get to the end and you say, well, we need to actually make some changes or some cuts, you're gonna wanna make sure that you're making cuts on your lower priority items instead of your top priority items. And so, zero-based budgeting does that. I will tell you that, when I came into Swartz Creek, I was getting letters from the Michigan Department of Ed. They were hovering around a 5% fund balance, which is never where you wanna get. And I, inherited the unfortunate situation of having that go on. It was not anyone's fault, it was just a product of the economy, and, in 2008, everything, had hit. But, we were in dire straits, and so I had to make some tough decisions. And nobody ever wants to go to somebody and say, 85% of our budget is people, right? Nobody wants to have those conversations, but sometimes those are the conversations you have to have. So you wanna make sure that if you're going to make those tough decisions, they're on the priorities that are further down the list than starting just at the top. I'm pleased to say that we're just around 17% fund balance at this point, so in the past 6 years, we've improved our fund balance by 12%. We've done that by adding money to our fund equity every single year. We've done that by using very innovative practices to make sure that our priorities are met. We've given out raises every year to our employees. I've settled, 6 now, long-term collective bargaining agreements as a district. And those have created security, for Swartz Creek for a long time. And, that's been a huge part of our success. So I have had a lot of experience on the general fund and school, food service budgets and all of those, but there's another area that has created a tremendous amount of growth for me, and I've had to manage it from the beginning, and that is our school bond project. And so when I came to Swartz Creek, the buildings were deteriorating. They had not passed a bond in 50 years. A much different story than a $185 million bond that was just passed here. So we at that time had to get to work. So we rolled up our sleeves. I organized a whole campaign, found community partners. We did the work, and we were able to pass what was the largest increase, quite frankly, in the state of Michigan for the past 6 years. And that has infused a tremendous amount of pride and community support. And then once those things happen from a financial side, as a superintendent, you understand what that means. As millage rates drop and increase, and you're working with your financial partners like PFM to be able to help you manage and navigate the future of where do these bonds go, and when do we need to retire debt, and when are we going to be able to make sure that we keep those things the same for our taxpayers, because our taxpayers value, all of us should, nobody wants to pay more in taxes, but I think we need to be able to honor and be good fiduciaries of those funds and make sure that we're transparent with how we're spending the money and do what we say we're gonna do with it. So if you add that on top of the general fund budgets, that's another, $50+ million that, we've had to manage on capital projects, and I've been a part of that from the ground floor up.
Thank you. Okay, question 20. How would you ensure we maintain a balanced budget that aligns our spending with our priorities?
I'll just add to my previous answer a little bit and say that involving other stakeholders in the budget development process is important. Usually what happens is I like to get started on that early. So I will come to you as a board and we'll have a very open and transparent conversation at the board meeting, and we'll start talking about, as we think about our priorities for next year, okay? And a lot of times that's informed by our strategic plan. But where do you as a board want to start making sure we're making our strategic investments? And we ensure that those are the things that we start building first. So then I go and I start to engage our staff. And so we have directors, we have principals, we have other staff that are overseeing different areas in the budget. And they can kind of give us an idea on what risks are coming up. They can give us an idea of, maybe what are some unforeseen costs. We didn't anticipate the Ukrainian crisis and gas prices being what they are, right? But if you could ever anticipate something like that, you would want to make sure that you were able to say, okay, we need to make sure we have a little extra money because fuel costs are going to skyrocket. And so that's another part of it, is starting early and involving the board and other staff members and stakeholders who are part of those budgets in making good financial forecasts. So I have a lot of experience in this area, and it's something that I think is really important as a sitting superintendent, that you are an active member and involved in making sure that those budgets are prudent and forecast accurately what's going to come. And so we've had some really good success in quadrupling or tripling actually our fund equity. So that's been a good experience to be a part of.
Awesome. Okay, 21, what opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
Well, I don't know that this answer would be different in another set of circumstances, but I think number 1 priority, especially in light of more recent events, is school safety. We allocate quite a bit of funding towards making sure that our entries are secure. We have a number of programs and products that are there to ensure we know who's in our buildings and when. Raptor Technologies is a screening program we use when people come into the building, so we know they're passing a background check. We know kind of who they are. I think another part of that is our resource officers and our partnerships with law enforcement. But if I were to think of a priority right now, people want to feel safe. Really excited about the secure entries that you are investing in as a district. I think that's really important. And I also think that has got to be a priority right now, because if people don't feel safe, they don't want to send their kids to school. They don't want to go to school. And safety means a lot of different things, but I believe that that's a critical priority. Number 2 would probably be instruction. That's our bread and butter. Maybe tied with mental health services. So I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of investment in our student mental health supports. And so it costs a lot of money to bring in a licensed social worker. It costs a lot of money to bring in counselors that are competent and able to do what they do. But again, prioritizing those things means that when you get down the list, you're ultimately going to have to say, there's something that we may not be able to do as a result of doing this. And those are decisions that you as a board need to be involved in, and I need to help you make those decisions. But at the same time, when you talk about opportunities, sometimes there are opportunities through budget reductions to be able to say, there's just something here, and maybe it was a sacred cow to a few people that needs to be addressed. And if we all agree at the table that that's low on the priority list, maybe this is the time that makes the most sense to discontinue that so that we can invest more heavily in these areas.
Thank you.
My friends only let me have 2 questions.
I'm sorry.
How would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate and necessary?
It's a great question. You only had 2, but that's one of my favorite questions so far, and I'll tell you why. So I'll tell you why. So I have when I went out to the Center for Educational Leadership, I've been doing a lot of research on the concept of the warm demander. And I believe that this embodies my leadership philosophy and style. And it's heavily baked in research. So I'll give you an example. The warm demander is somebody who has incredible amounts of empathy, but also incredibly high expectations for accountability. And what we see in society, whether we're studying leaders or even at the classroom level, you look at a teacher, we all know the teacher that we had in grade school or at any point in our lives that, was just super easy, and we were able to, just kind of skate on through class, and we just loved that person, but, maybe that person didn't really hold us to task a whole lot. And that's just the way that we've come to look at people. It's either one way or another, or maybe they're extremely high level of accountability. It's my way or the highway, but you don't feel as supported, okay? And what warm demander basically saying is that leadership is about duality of those 2 things. It's not about one or the other. You can't just say, well, look at me, I've got high expectations on high accountability, and then people view you as a tyrant and they're scared of you and you get compliance at best, right? The other part of it is you can't just be everybody's friend and laissez-faire and say, it's okay, and you're high on the support end, but then things aren't getting done and people are not being held accountable. And so the warm demander philosophy and how my leadership style is portrayed, and to answer a part of the first part of your question of how I would interact with administrators, is exactly that way. It would be to combine a level of high levels of expectations, but I'm never going to ask somebody to do something if I'm not going to give them the support and the resources to do it, because that's not fair. And so I believe in that at multiple levels, and the more work that I've done in over 20 years in education, what I understand is that that can be applied to so many different contexts. So as a baseline understanding, that is how I'm perceived. And so you'll hear that in my letters of recommendation, you'll hear that if you talk to people in my district. At first, they're not quite sure how to handle you because they want to put you into one of those categories. You're either gonna be the high expectations person or you're gonna be the warm and supportive person. But when you're both, people aren't used to being able to see that. And I think that's the hallmark of quality leadership, is that balance. One thing I will specifically also speak to on administrators, we have been doing a lot of work. It's actually groundbreaking work, and we're just actually finishing up a year. We're gonna be publishing a study, and we are the only district in the state, I know, could be the only district in the country doing this work, which is principal coaching. We have a lot of teacher coaching supports, we have teacher evaluation supports, and a lot of times the group that gets left out are the building administrators. A lot of times they're not necessarily given the same types of feedback and coaching that what we are providing. And so what we do is we set up inquiry cycles with our principals, and we really come to them and we let them be the driver, and we say, what is it that your building needs, and what's your goal for this next inquiry cycle? And an inquiry cycle is about 6 months, but we look at what we call a problem of practice. So the principal would say, well, I'm really concerned about our math scores, right? And particularly for this subgroup. Or maybe it's more about our attendance rates have plummeted for certain populations, or it could be anything. But what we do is we then provide them with an external coach, and then I'm coming alongside them as well as our deputy superintendent, and we're coming alongside and coaching them as well as the external coach. And I can tell you that our principals will tell you, and it's been a tremendously rewarding experience, they've grown just incredibly through this process, and there's just places are not doing this, and I think it's really important to not forget that our administrators are under a lot of pressure, and they're standing in the gap a lot of times. No doubt teachers, being a teacher they don't get enough credit, but I also think that there are some structural supports in all educational systems to support teachers, and not so much for administrators. And so we're doing some groundbreaking work on that. And if I was here in Novi, that is something I would really want to talk with you as a board about how we're coaching our leaders and making sure that they're developing, as well as our other staff.
Great, last question, Ben. How would you assess the current culture and climate of our district, and what would you do to positively impact it?
I think your district is in an interesting and understandable state with having 3 top positions in the district moving on. And I think there's a lot of circumstances that surround that, but I think that when you look at that happening, there could be some anxiety amongst the staff or the community about who is going to be our next leader, who's going to be able to come in and help pull those things together. I think that the climate, as I assess it, is one where you really need somebody who's done this job and has had the experience and has been battle tested and through the fire, that can come pull people together and unify the district. And that's something that, and I'll just say a few things, and at risk of my current board, they know that I'm here tonight, but when I came to Swartz Creek, it was what they would call a split or divided board. And when I think of a split or divided board, that doesn't mean that they vote certain ways. It means that they weren't necessarily doing things in ways that were respectful and productive to further the district. I certainly do not think that that's the situation here, but one of the things that I was able to do as a superintendent is pull people together. making sure that people's voices are heard, that the board was able to be effective, and that set a tremendously calming tone across the district. I think one of the things that I bring to the table is having not only that experience, but multiple experiences as a superintendent of a large district. And I think that coming into a situation where there may be some anxiety, there may be some fear about what's gonna happen, and it's true, I mean, the people who were here were incredible human beings. They were very, very successful in their fields. But this district is built on a tremendous foundation. And you have so many great people that are in not only the trenches, but your kids and your community members. This district has a tremendously bright future. And I quite frankly believe that this opportunity is an amazing opportunity, and that I do believe that I would be able to come in and help unify people and allay some fears, and that would be something I would get started on right away. So I think it's natural that there's going to be some concern and consternation in the wake of that, but I also think it's important to help keep people's mind on moving forward and what the vision is of the future. And that there's a very bright future for this district, and I believe that I would love to be a part of that.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Madam President?
Thank you. We would like to take a few minutes now to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for our board.
Do you want me to use the full 6 minutes?
We are also going to give you an opportunity with your time remaining after that, if there's anything you'd like to add. So if you would like to mix those, we'll do that for you and all the
Yeah.
other candidates.
Thank you. I guess my question is similar to Mr. Smith's question for you. What do you see as the biggest challenge, or maybe the cultural situation that you're in here as the district?
Anybody can answer, or I can?
I'm
Okay,
willing to.
Mrs. Roney.
I see, because we've lost our 3 positions, that a lot of our community members or stakeholders do not trust us as a board.
Mm-hmm.
And also probably as an administration, what's left of it. So we have to bring that trust back.
Sure.
So I see that as our biggest obstacle.
I appreciate you being honest and sharing that. That's helpful for me to kind of understand, and I think kind of ties into what I was saying earlier. I don't have a lot of other questions. I do know a lot about the district. I live just down the street and have been very, very close to a lot of the things that have been happening over the past 20 years, quite frankly. I mean, I started teaching just down the street in South Line. I will say in closing though that this is not something that I took lightly. When I chose to apply here, it's because I truly believe that this can be the best district in the state of Michigan, maybe even in the country. And I want to see an opportunity where I can go to stay. I would like to create longevity someplace. I mean, quite frankly, I could work for well beyond, 1 or 2 more decades. And as long as you would still want me and the community would still want me, I would love to make that type of investment here. I believe that my skills, my qualifications, my background, my skill set, I think that I really truly believe that this is what the district needs right now, and that I can help step in and fill some of those gaps. And I just want you to know that I'm incredibly honored that I'm here tonight, and I appreciate all of the time that you're going to be putting in over the next few weeks and all of the time that you have put in. It's incredibly important for your community and your students, and I'm just very grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. So we have 3 minutes, so we are just going to close then, unless you have anything else. I see you've
I
got
have a
up
few
your.
things, and I just want to, I'm gonna pass them around. These are copies of my resume, which I know you have, but I also have some letters of recommendation. I also have my 100-day plan of entry, as well as a website that I put together for you as a board to be able to learn a little bit more about my background and experience. It's just called mincaleadership.com, and it's right here in all these materials, so I'll leave you with this, and I really hope to speak with you again about the position.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, we're not done. Sorry. Thank you.
Will you come?
Nice to meet you too. Welcome.
And as she got
Lovely and
closer,
talented
she was
Mary Ann.
she got prettier. Yeah. She's secure or something. I know. Hi.
Hi, we're John Tom Smith. Nice to meet you.
Kathy Hood. Good to
All
meet
right.
you.
Okay. Like your attitude already. Oh, are we missing? Okay, there he is.
Good evening. On behalf of Novi Community School District, I would like to welcome John Bernia to this interview for the position of superintendent. Mr. Bernia is currently Chief Academic Officer for Warren Consolidated Schools in Warren, Michigan. I will take a few moments to briefly describe our format. The interview may take up to 90 minutes. There will be 23 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give you the opportunity to ask questions of the board, make a closing statement. We will let you know if time is becoming an issue and there is a need to pick up the pace of the responses. We have a 90-minute timer that's real big in case you have a vision problem. For those watching this interview, we welcome your feedback. Those watching virtually may use the link provided for this purpose. Those present may either use the QR code or paper form provided. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as the elected representatives of our community, we value and seriously consider the input of our stakeholders in this process. So I will begin with our first question. Mr. Bernia, while we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, audience members have not. Please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
Sure. So, good evening, Madam President, members of the board. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. As you mentioned, my name is John Bernia. I'm finishing up my 6th year as the Chief Academic Officer for Warren Consolidated Schools. Warren Con is a 13,000 student district east on 696. And we service parts of Warren, Sterling Heights, and Troy. So we have 12 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, 3 comprehensive high schools. We have an alternative high school. We have a career prep center that houses the vast majority of our 21 CTE programs. We have a virtual performing arts program for middle schoolers and high schoolers. That high school program is actually nationally recognized. We have a math and science program for middle school kids, and we're the home of the Macomb Math Science Technology Center, which has been educating some of the top students from South Macomb. It's a consortium school, about 11 school districts that feed into it, and that's been serving kids for more than 30 years now. My role, I oversee the day-to-day operations of all of that. So I supervise the principals and the day-to-day operations of their schools. I'm also charged with their leadership development as their direct supervisor. I also lead the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, so our executive director of curriculum. We have some administrators and coaches and curriculum developers that work in that division. I supervise our special education department. Our 3 special ed supervisors report directly to me, so I serve as kind of a quasi-special ed director currently. I supervise our people service department and public relations. In addition to that, I'm on the superintendent's team, so I've had the good opportunity to work for our superintendent. More about our superintendent when we get on a little bit here, but I've had the good opportunity to work for Dr. Livernoy for about 6 years, and that's given my work portfolio a number of different opportunities. So I'm on our bond team, I'm on our negotiating team with the Warren Education Association and the Warren Administrators Association. I actually served as our chief negotiator during an administrative shift. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point in the interview. And just a whole host of opportunities. I work with our business office on budget development and anything else that gets assigned to me over the years. I'm a graduate student at Oakland University. I'm finishing up my doctorate. I had a big meeting last Friday with my chair, and she's accepted my last revisions, which is an exciting time. Nobody's more excited than my mom, because in a few weeks she's going to place the call to all the relatives and her friends and tell them to start calling me Dr. Bernia. She's really excited, and if I don't mention that, she'd get mad. So my wife Jen and I have been married for 15 years, coming up on 16, and we're the proud parents of Avery, who's going to turn 10, just finished the 4th grade, and Micah, who's 6 and just finished kindergarten. So it's an exciting time at our house, but it's not very quiet usually. I'm here tonight because my cover letter says that I'm interested in serving as your superintendent. This is a top-tier school system in a top-tier county, and your reputation is exemplary. The study that I've done since this position was first posted, since the announcement first came out, has done nothing but confirm that. We'll talk about that as we go. But I come from a line, people that have worked for Dr. Livernoy have gone on to be superintendents in various places, Richmond, Bay City, Southgate, Rochester, and Warren Woods. And I think that the thing about our leadership style and the thing about the core beliefs of people that come out of our school of thought is that when you're going to be a superintendent, number one, it's an all-in commitment, and number two, you should be looking for a place where you want to make a long-term commitment. Dr. Livernoy has been in our district for 15 years, and based on his energy and his health, he probably could go another 15. And that's the kind of superintendency that I want to have, and that's the kind of superintendency people that have worked for Dr. Livernoy have gone on to have. And so as I did the homework on your district, and as I studied up and visited your website, drove through your community, and just have done kind of a big review of everything, I found that, number one, your reputation is what it is because you do have an exemplary school system. But I found that this is something that I think fits me, but it also fits my wife and kids too. Because if I'm going to be all in, it has to fit my whole family. And I found that that is to be the case. And I see this as a potential for some long-term, a long-term stable relationship. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your upcoming doctorate. What are the immediate challenges you would expect to face as our superintendent? Given these, tell us how you would hit the ground running on your first day and be ready to address these challenges.
Sure. So if anyone on my team is watching right now, they're going to roll their eyes because I have a written plan for you that I'll give you at the end, and I'm known for this whole write a memo written plan. I fundamentally believe that if you can't put it down on paper, you don't really have an idea. So I'll give this to you to review at the end, but just to kind of give you a high level overview of what I'm thinking as I get ready to come in. My plan really has 6 really main focus areas, and under those 6 areas, it really breaks down into some goals, some actions that I'm going to take in the first 90 days as your superintendent, and then some objectives. So clear, measurable things that you as a Board of Education can expect to see. It's really going to hinge on 2 things. Number one, really listening and learning. So every leadership position that I've come into, I've met with people to ask them the same 3 questions. Where are we good? Where do we need to grow? And what do you need from me? And so I will come back to you at a public meeting and share with you the results of all of those conversations. When I became Chief Academic Officer, it worked out to be about 53 meetings with various stakeholders in about 26 days. And that's pretty similar to what it was when I became a principal too. And so I point that out because I think the most important thing I can do in the first stage of things to get started is really hear directly from you, hear directly from the staff, hear directly from the community, hear directly from the kids, and hear from them as to how they see those 3 areas. In my experience, people are more likely to support what they help to build. And so I believe that we're going to build a collective vision through that process. So when I come back to you and I tell you what we're good at, those will be probably some core value things that you probably already know, and we'll celebrate those things that we're good at. Those areas where we identify that we need to grow, those will be our first set of organizational goals that you can expect to get reports and updates from me and our team. And then the third leg of what people need from me, that'll serve as my round, my goals for the purpose of my review, my evaluation. So that's kind of the whole process that I'm going to go through to listen and learn, but I'm also really aware that summer is not as long as we might think it is, right? So September 6th is going to be here quick as we get started. And so it's going to be really important that we're ready at every stage of the game. It's going to be really important for us to welcome our administrators back when they return to work, or welcome our staff back and be ready for the first day of school, because our work in July is going to make it possible for everybody to have that positive first day of school that everybody posts on Facebook and hangs pictures of at their house. And so if we're going to deliver on that promise, we're going to have to be ready and know what those things are. So I'm going to be listening and learning, but I'm also going to be making sure that we're ready to open school, which is a pretty key job that I'll be focused on.
Thank you. Given your research on our district, what do you believe are the 2 or 3 most critical long-term priorities we will need to address? And how would your background and skills help us address these priorities?
I think in doing the homework, you can't do the homework on your district right now and not see that you're going through a leadership transition. So obviously that is going to be a pretty critical job. I've been on a senior leadership team that was high performing. I've been on a senior leadership team that was in transition, and then I've been on a senior leadership team that was struggling. And I can tell you which one was the best for our staff and for our families and for our board. And so it's going to be a big job for me to help our new leadership team move from a team that's forming to a team that's performing. And we're going to have to work really hard together to make that happen. But in doing the research, it's clear that there are people that are held in very high esteem who are moving on to other roles right now, and we're gonna have to be sensitive and respectful of that while making sure that we're building a new team to help us work together to write that next chapter of that success story that you have. The thing that I think is a testament to Novi, as I've reviewed your meetings and as I've reviewed your district improvement plans and your other artifacts that are on your website, is this just stability that you all appreciate and that you all maintain. And so it's gonna be a big job for me as I've done the research, as we go through that leadership transition. It's gonna be really important to ensure that we do our job so that we can maintain that high level of stability. So that's gonna be a real pressing issue. I think a second pressing issue for me is that I'm not from here. And so I think it's gonna be important for me to understand, I mentioned the first day of school, that's pretty universal. But there are community traditions that I'm gonna wanna know about, and I'm gonna wanna make sure that we deliver on for all of our kids and all of our parents. And so for me, a second immediate thing would be your website and your social media footprint just screams of the wonderful traditions that you have, and I don't wanna mess that up. And so, in the process of not messing that up, it's gonna be a big job for me to learn. And then the third piece of it, I started my career in Lake Orion Community Schools. I was a teacher and an assistant principal and a principal there, and then I moved over to Warren Consolidated Schools. And I think one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest things to overcome was the vocabulary. Everything in Lake Orion was called something different in Warren Con, and you only get one chance to make a good first impression. And so if you don't know the vocabulary, you're gonna look unprepared, and that's gonna really hinder the ability to kind of offer some sense that we're gonna stabilize and go through this transition and end in the stable place that Novi expects us to be in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What specific qualities and capabilities do you bring to this position that may set you apart from others?
I think that my level of preparation to get ready for this, I have had the good fortune of working for an exceptional superintendent who's really one of the top guys in the business. But I've also had the opportunity to be mentored by some of the most incredible superintendents that the profession has ever seen. There are men and women that have invested some of their time and energy into me to help me get prepared for this. And I don't know that everybody has had the good fortune I've had to sit with just some of the heavy hitters, as I like to say, from this profession. I think another thing that sets me apart, I think the size and scale that we work at in Warren Consolidated Schools, I think is big. We're more than 30 square miles as a school system, and we're one of the most diverse school systems in the state. And so when you think about a school system like we have, where more than 40% of our kids are current or former English language learners, that's a huge undertaking to make sure that we're building a school system that's accessible not only for our families that speak English at home, but our families that don't. And so I think that that's something that I bring to the table, just the size, the scale, and the experience that's a little bit unique, because there's not a lot of districts the size of our district, and there's not a lot of districts with the demographics of our district that have to make us think differently if we're gonna build a school system that's gonna be good for everybody and that's gonna fit everybody and is gonna be welcoming for everybody.
Thank you. We will move on to Trustee Cook. He has some questions for you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruskin. Maintaining healthy relationships with school and community stakeholders is important to the Board of Education. Please share with us how you have gone about building and maintaining successful relationships with all members of the school community.
Sure. I think your question, Mr. Cook, I think as an undertone to that, you value those community relationships and I value them too. I think it's really important. And so something I mentioned a second ago, there's this incredible diversity in Warren Consolidated Schools. And so for us to build community partnerships, it means reaching out and branching out and finding ways to connect with families that maybe don't speak English at home. And so one of the most key partnerships we've had is with the Chaldean Community Foundation. The Chaldean Community Foundation has been generous enough to equip us with a forum to connect with our families that speak Arabic. And there's a high concentration of those families that need information about sending their kids to kindergarten, that need information about immunizations, that really critically needed information during the pandemic that we otherwise would not have been able to provide to them. And so that community partnership was really critical to us to make sure that we were maintaining that open door and we were hearing directly from our families that English was not their first language. Because it can be a little intimidating when you don't speak the native language to pick up the phone and call the main line at your school. So we had to think differently as to how can we make that accessible and how can we make that work. I think a second partnership has been with our churches. We host something that we call our faith-based community partners breakfast, and it's not just our churches, but it's a lot of community organizations throughout our district. But we bring them in and we give them presentations about the things that we're working on. We just did one not too long ago about student mental health and well-being, just so that they know what we're doing and they can ask us questions. And a lot of times, some ideas for partnerships have grown from there. WarrenCon has maintained a partnership with Gleaners. It's kind of fallen off, but it was really critical during the pandemic when we needed to distribute food to our community. And so our partnership with Gleaners Food Bank is another example of something that I worked through when I was the point person for that project. So those are three ways that we've kind of engaged different community organizations to ensure that we're building those quality community relationships and being accessible. And then I think the last piece of the puzzle, I'm very, very serious, not only for myself, I hold myself to the standard, but I hold our leaders to a standard that we return every phone call. And so if parents call, we will call them back and get them the information and get them the answers that they need. They might not always like our answers, but at the same time, I will sleep at night knowing that I called you back and you didn't like my answer, as opposed to I never called you back. And so I think that that's another important, and that's not a big public presentation with pictures and stories in the newspaper, but it's something we're really serious about on our team. And it's something that I model, and it's something that goes all the way down through all of our leaders. We call everybody back. We have a 24-hour turnaround. And sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes, when we would go through some of the changes during the pandemic and we would get, 70 calls, we would have to be upfront and say, we're going to get to you as fast as we can. But we really do try to maintain that 24-hour turnaround to make sure that we stay in touch with people.
Thank you. How do you think various stakeholders such as parents, staff members, and community members should be involved in our planning process in setting the direction of the district?
Yeah, to go backwards in one of my answers, the people are more likely to support what they help to create. And so the providing opportunities to take surveys, providing opportunities for focus groups, providing opportunities to just be places and listen, I think are pretty important, not only for the community, not only for parents, but for staff members too. I can't tell you how many times I'm walking down the hallway of a school and a teacher sees me and tells me about an idea that they've had, and something that they want to try. And being accessible and being available for that, to me, is very important, because that's where the best ideas come from. I can't tell you that it's frustrating to be in the parking lot at Harwood Elementary School in the morning. I believe the parents when they tell me that it is, and I'm working on a solution to that problem with our operations team and their principal, but that's something that I just have to listen and empathize and really ensure that we can be responsive. So it's big things, it's strategic plans, and it's where do we hope to see the district go, and what are the needs of the district, and what would you like to see us accomplish over the next 5 years? It's big things, but it's also small things too. It's that teacher consultant being able to say, if I could just meet with the kids on my caseload for 25 minutes a day, it would be a game changer. And working with that person to try to make that happen at Sterling Heights High School or that Harwood Elementary parking lot that I was just talking to you about. As the more accessible you are, the more of a listener you are, and the more people see you try to resolve their issue and you try to get back with them, I think the more likely they are to bring ideas forward, and that's the kind of environment I want to cultivate.
Okay. Effective and timely communication is vital to the success of a school district. Please describe the type of communication students, staff, parents, and the board should expect to receive from you.
So when I was a principal, I was known as a Friday newsletter guy. So I published a staff newsletter every Friday and a parent newsletter every Friday that came to parents. Now, I'm sensitive as a central office person to not step on the principal toes too much. So a parent-student communication, I think, is something that we're gonna have to navigate and work through so that I give the schools the space that they need, because you really don't need an email from your teacher, your principal, and the superintendent all in one day. Right? That's too much. So I'm gonna pick my spots on that, but I am gonna be engaged and I am gonna be involved. And it's not just gonna be email, we'll do robocalls or we'll do meetings and things of that nature. But communication is key, because clarity is the most important thing we can do. If we're clear with people about the goals that we have and what we're trying to achieve, that is going to be incredibly important to ensuring that people know what we're trying to accomplish. So on the student-parent front, I think it's being at events and being willing to talk and communicate. I also think that it's also picking your spots, whether it's electronically or via text message or through social media. On the staff side of things, I think a regular staff update is a good idea. Again, I want to respect the principal as the leader of the school, but I think that that's important. I think for our leaders, I think one of the most important things I do for our principals is a regular, timely communication. So I give them regular email updates, I give them regular text updates about things that are happening as they're happening, so that our principals are armed with the information that they need. The worst thing that can happen is we do something here at the board table, our principals don't know about it, and they're asked about it the next morning in the parking lot, and they're stuck saying, I don't know. That's not a good look for the system. So I think timely communication is really important. And then on the board front, one of the things I noticed about your website is that you have on your org chart, you have this graphic on how things feed through the superintendent to you. And we run that same system in Warren Consolidated Schools. So every Friday, our superintendent sends a newsletter to the board. All the cabinet members are responsible to contribute things to them, and then that all gets delivered to the board members so that they have that regular ongoing communication. So that is one thing that I'll look to set up with you. But as we go through and as we go through my entry plan and as we meet individually, it's going to be, what would a newsletter on Friday look like and feel like to you? Would that be helpful? It's going to be between board meetings, what is the best way to communicate with you? Something I've come to appreciate with the superintendents that have mentored me is how adaptable they have to be for board member communication. Some board members like to meet in person. Some board members like to talk on the phone. Some board members like to text. And I'm going to be flexible with that, because it's important that you all have the information that you need to do your work and to be effective board members. My goal would be, when you go to the Michigan Association of School Boards or Oakland Schools or anywhere else, that you would feel comfortable saying to a board member from another district, our superintendent is incredibly accessible and we are always informed of what's happening. And that would be a goal that I would strive for and would work to deliver on the superintendent board front, because the more information you have, the more informed you are, and the more you have a common pool of information to draw from, the more effective the board can be.
Thank you. Trustee Hood?
Thank you. As our superintendent, how would you advocate for political action that benefits our district and public education throughout our state?
Sure. Well, Ms. Hood, I have been a school leader in northern Oakland County, where there is a very deeply held set of political beliefs and voter patterns, and I'm a school leader in southern Macomb County, where there is a completely different set of deeply held political views. The folks in Warren and the folks in Lake Orion do not vote the same way. And I've never had a problem, and the reason I've never had a problem is that my advocacy is for the system and for the schools. And so as we go through really the first year that we work together, I'll be asking you a lot about the political issues of the day to try to gauge the board and find out where your consensus is so that I can hear directly from you. I think that that's one of the most important things I can do, because I am never, as the superintendent, going to advocate for John Bernia's political beliefs. Who I vote for when I'm the superintendent and I step between the lines, who I vote for is irrelevant. How I advocate for the school system is vital. And so understanding the board, understanding the views of our staff, understanding the needs of our community is going to help me do just that. I have a close relationship with the chair of the Oakland County Superintendent's Legislative Committee. And so he and I have had some really good talks just to make sure that I stay informed as to what the Oakland County superintendents are thinking about. I have a good sense of what the Macomb County superintendents are thinking about through my work with Dr. Livernoy. And then there's things like the K-12 Alliance, where I would look to participate and look to be a part of. A proud moment for me, about a year and a half ago, the K-12 Alliance actually used some of my work. I did some research on a topic and really dug in on something and gave it to our superintendent, and he passed it along to the leadership of the K-12 Alliance, and I got to sit in a meeting with Dr. Rice. It was web-based, but still, I was there, and it was an exciting moment for me. But I think being there and being part of the conversation and building relationships, not only with our federal and state legislators, but building relationships with our community, right? We should have a really good relationship. I can tell you, we have an outstanding relationship with the city of Sterling Heights, their mayor and their police department, and it is a incredible assist to us whenever we need something or whenever they need something from us, to have that open door. So I'm going to look to build those relationships and cultivate them, but I'm also going to look to advocate for the system. And really, and to do that, I need to understand the system, and I can assure you I will work really hard on that.
Thank you. Superintendents are often faced with the challenge of making decisions when there is no clear right answer and members of the community are split on the right path forward. Talk about a time when you were faced with a difficult decision where you knew there would be a group of people unhappy with your decision, whichever way you decided. How did you go about making that decision and getting people on board with the direction you determined was best?
I am the one who closed our early childhood center. I decentralized the programs and put them back into their elementary schools. And to this day, if you come to our district, there are people that would tell you it was not the right thing to do. And there are people that still, they're not going to send me Christmas cards, that's for certain. Let me tell you how it happened. So Warren Consolidated Schools built an early childhood center, and it was located in a neighborhood just north of 15 Mile Road. Warren Con starts just south of 17 Mile and goes to just about 10.5 mile, give or take. And so when we studied the demographics and who was actually attending programs at that site, at the Early Childhood Center, what we noticed was it was a high concentration of kids that were living in the neighborhood by the Early Childhood Center. We were not necessarily drawing from the entire district. So what we had was an Early Childhood Center, which looked great on our literature, which was wonderful in our commercials, but our Early Childhood Center wasn't serving all kids. Kids that were living on the south side of our district their parents were not driving them to our Early Childhood Center. And in addition to that, the kids that were going to our Early Childhood Center, because they were in a habit of driving to school every day, were shopping around for elementary schools and were not necessarily going to our elementary schools, which was also a problem. So what I wanted to do was think through how can we build an early childhood footprint that serves all kids, not just some kids. So that was the rationale that I walked into the superintendent's office with and said, this is what I think we ought to do. We have classroom space in our elementary schools, and I think we ought to decentralize this and put them and build elementary schools that are pre-K-5. And he sat back and he looked at me and said, that is a bold thought. And I said, I know. And he said, that's on our postcard. And I said, I know. But it's not serving all kids. And I said, if you give me the opportunity, just give me 10 minutes to show it to you on your board, I'll lay it all out for you. Just give me a chance. And so he did, and I laid it all out for him, and he took it all in, and he said, I see where you're coming from. I do. I see your point. He said, but this is going to be very difficult for you because it's not going to be well received. So I was the one. I explained to our Board of Education how this was going to go. And I am proud to tell you that I met with every single person that had a problem with it, every teacher that had a problem with it, every administrator that was concerned about it. I met with all of them. And followed through and explained my rationale and told them why I was thinking what I was thinking, and we did it. We pulled the plug. And what ended up happening was we took and we decentralized those programs. Our transitional kindergarten program went from 4 classrooms, it's at 9 classrooms right now. Our World of Forest preschool program went from 80-some kids to more than 200 kids. It worked. And in addition to that, those kids are more likely to stick with our system because they're seeing themselves as students of a school. They're no longer preschool students, they're preschool students who go to Cromie, or they're preschool students who go to Searsma. And they're more likely to stick with us for kindergarten, and then they stay in the system. So from a business standpoint, it made a lot of sense too. I can tell you from my viewpoint, it worked. People will tell you, he's insane because he did it. But all these years later, I think our pre-K-5 hubs that we have in our community is one of the things I'm most proud of. It also left us with this vacant building. So our early childhood center we were slated to do some bond work there. And we met with our outside experts, who were brilliant, and said to them, is there something we could do with this building that might make it look like an alternative high school? And they came back with a design that was incredible. And so we took our early childhood center and through a bond project, turned it into an alternative high school. There are people that would tell you that I was crazy for doing that too, because we gave our alternative high school kids their own building that's sized for them. And it's become incredibly positive for them. But I can tell you that going through that period of time was a lot of work. There were a lot of phone calls, there were a lot of meetings, but I knew that if we could decentralize it, we had a better chance of serving all kids, which was the goal that we started with, and that's what we weren't doing.
Okay, thank you. Next, please share specific ways that our district should work with other districts to support learning for all students.
I first met folks from Novi. I was working in Lake Orion. I first met folks from Novi, it would be more than 10 years ago, when the Galileo Teacher Leadership Project was just in its infancy. And I think that that was one of the most transformational things that ever happened in Oakland County, because it changed how we thought about leadership in our schools. And Novi was at the very forefront of that. And I believe the Galileo Institute is currently led by a former Novi employee, if I'm not mistaken. And there might be a few of them that lead that organization now. And I think that what's happened there is the way that it has transformed, and the way we've thought about teacher leadership, and the way we've thought about the way that we've wrestled with the idea that chances are a teacher is going to be in a place longer than an administrator. And teachers are the ones that are providing stability in a lot of cases. I met with a teacher when I became the principal of Carlton Middle School. I was her 14th principal. And so when you think about the turnover of that, I mean, that's extraordinary. And I think that the more we can do to stabilize that, the better it'll be for our schools, the more stabilizing it'll be for our schools, and I think that's good for our kids. So Novi has a tradition of doing that. And so I would look to see what partnerships you currently have, and then I would look to see how we grow those partnerships through places like Oakland schools. I know on the east side of Oakland County where I live, a couple districts partner together and they visit each other's schools, and my daughter's been part of some of that. And I don't know how much of that's gotten to the west side of the county, but that's something that I think we should think about and talk about if it fits us and if we think it adds value to what we're already doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll turn to Trustee Mena.
What is the most difficult decision you've had to deal with in your educational career, and how was it resolved?
The most difficult decision, the early childhood decision was a really difficult one, because and obviously it worked out quite well. I think that for me, it might not be a difficult decision that I want to highlight, but maybe a difficult time. Certainly there were a series of difficult decisions during the pandemic where I don't know how it was here, but we didn't make anybody happy no matter what we did, despite our best efforts. And I think there was a series of tough times and tough decisions there, but I'm going to take you all the way back. So I was approached to be chief academic officer. I was drafted into this role and told that I was going to do it in March of 2016. And in April of 2016, my daughter Micah was born. So when I started on July 1st at my house, I had a 3-month-old. And so I was sleeping a ton, which is a great time to make that move from the building leadership to central office. And during that period of time, what I inherited, almost everybody that was going to be on my team left. They went to pursue other opportunities or they retired. So I only had one person. Everybody else was new to their role. And we had 3 schools on the priority school list, which meant that they were in the bottom performing 5% of the whole state. 3 of our elementary schools. And the rest of our schools were in the bottom 25%. Our employees were taking massive concessions at that time. Our district had gone into deficit, and our employees were taking somewhere between an 8 and a 10% concession across the board. It was really a difficult time, and it's very hard to retain staff in that situation. Added to that, shortly after I came on board, the K-3 reading legislation passed, which is almost a perfect storm where the mandatory retention of kids was going to start to come on. So we had to start figuring out what we were going to do about that because we have this incredible number of English language learners. In addition to that, we have elementary schools in the bottom 5% of the state. This could potentially be catastrophic for us. So we got started and we were working through the fall, and this was all going to come to a head really between January and March. We were knee deep in our work with our leaders and our teachers getting ready for standardized tests. We were negotiating with our unions to try to give some concession relief because our finances had improved a little bit, but we really had to be careful there because we wanted to do something to retain our employees and to show them a good faith, but we didn't have enough money to make them whole by any stretch of the imagination. And then we're also trying to build a response to the K-3 reading legislation that we don't have any money to invest in right now because our employees are taking massive concessions. So new spending is really not a great idea right now in the negotiating process that we're in. In the midst of all of this, my wife told me that she wasn't feeling so good. And so we made an appointment with her doctor, and she had some tests, and we had this, it culminates in this meeting with her doctor where the outcome was going to be somewhere between bad and catastrophic. So that's nerve-wracking, as you can imagine. My daughter Micah at this point is about 9 months old, and she's teething. And my daughter Avery is in that period right before kindergarten where we're really trying to make sure she's ready to start school. So my wife had to have some really invasive surgery, and she was going to be hospitalized for a little while and then was going to be very limited as to what she could do. And we had all of these things going on at work where it really wasn't a great time to take time off. And my poor daughter's teething, and then my other daughter's getting ready for kindergarten. So it was a crazy schedule. I would get up early, respond to emails, work on paperwork, get prepared, get my girls ready, take them to daycare and to school, and then I would go to work, and then I'd go visit my wife for a little while and get an update from her doctor, and then I'd pick my girls up, and dinner, bath time, playtime, bedtime, and then I'd do some more work, and then I'd fall asleep in my chair. And then the cycle would repeat. And about the 4th day of this, I realized I just have to, if I could win today, if I could just have a successful day today, I'll get through. And so I just took that as my motto, just win the day. So I just kept winning the day. And then my wife came home. And then she could do a little bit more. And Micah's teeth had all broken through, so she started to be a little bit more comfortable. And we started to get some progress on our negotiation front. And we actually built a system for K-3 reading. And our school started to perform better. And Avery's 100-day project turned out okay, which was really stressful, because I'm not good at that. But we got it done. And so over time, we finally just broke through and we started to stack up some wins. And we got through it. It was very stressful and it was very difficult. And there was a series of choices and decisions that I had to make that were very difficult because I had to prioritize what I was going to work on and what was going to be most important for me. But I can tell you, my wife is in good health. Everything worked out there. My daughter's teeth are perfect. Per her dentist. You'd like to know that, Dr. Ruskin. My daughter Avery had a successful year in kindergarten. We started to give our employees relief. And that retained our employees, which was critical to us because we really needed them to stick with us at that time. And over time, we've been able to make them whole. And our teachers just got their first raise since 2014 this year. And we've been able to work with our union in a collaborative way to bring that along. And I've been on that team the entire time, which I'm really, really proud of. On a K-3 reading legislation front, we just got our report from CEPI. 98% of our kids came back fine. So we're super proud of that. Last year, 97% of our kids came back fine, so we were super proud of that too. And then on the priority school front, we made dramatic improvements. We worked with our teachers and our principals. We were recognized by the Mackinac Center as having some of the top turnaround schools in the state. We were also recognized by the Macomb Intermediate School District by having some of the biggest growth numbers. Simply put, there's not one decision I can highlight in all of that for you, but I can tell you that there was a series of decisions where we had to prioritize and evaluate and prioritize and evaluate, and that's what led us to the outcome that I just shared. Thank you.
What are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and our board?
I think that one of the most important things that I have learned, I think the successful superintendents that I've had the good fortune to be around would tell you, they would all use the term transparency. And I think that that's critically important to make sure that I'm accessible to you and that I give you the information that you need. That you feel like when you come to me, I tell you what you need to know and I tell you everything. Because the board superintendent bond and relationship rests on your ability to trust me and trust me as your employee to work for all of you and work on behalf of the kids of the school district. So, and you'll see it in my plan, establishing a good system where I give you information on a regular basis, establishing an accessibility system where we can talk and you can make sure that you can ask your questions and I can get you your information, ensuring that we have good board agendas and that we spend our time purposefully here, I think is going to be really important. And I think it's also about accessibility. It's important that you know when you call me that I'm going to be there. And that you'll be able to get a hold of me and that I'll be able to get you the information that you need. So I think it rests on trust and communication, and it's a relationship. I look forward to getting to know all of you. I look forward to letting you get to know me. I'm so proud. Our 7 board members in Warren Consolidated Schools all know my children, they know my wife, and I know their kids, and I know their spouses, and that's the kind of relationship I hope we all have. And so I think that it's about trust and it's about communication, and when you have those two things in place, your relationships can flourish, and I think that those are the testaments of a really strong board superintendent team.
Thank you. How do you inspire and engage the entire school community in support of the district's vision and mission?
We build it together. People support what they help to build. And I'm going to listen, and I'm going to collaborate, and I'm going to ensure that the employees here, the staff here, feel connected to what we're doing and what our mission is. And central to that is being able to clearly articulate what those values are, what that mission is, and what we're working on and what our goals are. So just going through this ongoing process of listening, going through this ongoing process of ensuring that we're communicating effectively, those are all going to be very important to me. I think people are inspired to work at a place where they feel like they're making a difference. I think people get out of bed in the morning and they do the best that they can, and they want to have an impact, and they want to see that they want to do well. And so if we can help them understand what our goals are, if we can help them see what we're striving for, then they're more likely to be inspired, they're more likely to be motivated, they're more likely to want to be here, right? There's an old adage in one of my favorite leadership books, and it says, why are the employees who are so unmotivated during the workday so excited when they're at the bowling alley? And the reason is they know how to win at the bowling alley, right? They knock the pins down. But if you don't know how to win at work, you're going to feel pretty disengaged and pretty deflated. And so our job as the leaders is to ensure that, and it's not just our teachers, it's our administrators, it's our support staff, it's everybody. Our custodians and bus drivers and kitchen staff and secretaries, they have to know how they win too, right? And we have to do a good job of defining what winning looks like and engaging them in a process to determine what does winning look like and honoring that and cheering on that and supporting that. That's how you motivate people, and that's how you inspire people to do well.
Thank you. Trustee Murphy?
Okay, what experience and success have you had with closing the achievement gap for economically disadvantaged and minority students?
Well, I shared it a few minutes ago. You know, we've had a pretty dramatic turnaround in Warren Consolidated Schools. 40% of our students are current or former EL students. Our free and reduced lunch rate currently is 71%. So we have universal free breakfast and lunch at our 12 elementary schools. And so we really do have some neighborhoods in our community that have been hit really hard. And so I think that for us, it's been a series of things. It's really a commitment to using the resources and practices that we have. I think education by nature has done a poor job of always chasing the next thing. We're always chasing that next big silver bullet. But in Warren Con, we've been really disciplined on using our resources well and using what we have. I think that's really helped us. I think a common language has really helped us so that our teachers at all 12 of our elementary schools know exactly when we say guided reading block or literacy block, we know, everybody knows what we're talking about. And we worked really hard to make sure that we have total clarity around that. About 2 years ago, we went through a period where we found out that there wasn't clarity. And I pulled together an entire group of people and we studied the issue and we issued some things to really clarify exactly what we were talking about. Currently, a problem that we have that really keeps me up at night is our kids that are in second grade. These are kids who were in kindergarten when the shutdown happened. So March, April, May, June of your kindergarten year, every day of school is important. All time in school is important. I don't deny that. But those months in kindergarten are some of the most integral, that is one of the most integral times, pressed to the wire by you in this interview to say, what is the most important time in a child's education? That stretch of kindergarten is on my list. And those kids lost that. So they are currently in our system, they are currently in second grade, and they are not where we want them to be. And that is not their fault. But this summer, what we have done, and we're calling it a literacy summit, we're gonna bring together every third grade teacher in the district. This is new, this is breaking news, because I'm gonna announce this tomorrow in Warren Con, so you're getting an advanced copy. But we're gonna bring together every third grade teacher and every elementary principal to deliver complete clarity on what we're gonna do about this. And we're gonna have a really good, healthy discussion. It's not gonna be a sit and get, we're gonna mix it up. And we're gonna have some good, healthy conflict as to what's the best way to approach this issue. But we're gonna work together and we're gonna have extreme clarity across our 12 elementary schools as to what we're doing for these third grade kids. We've been very successful. Our human resources department has been wonderful. They have pledged that we won't have any split classes in third grade next year, which is a huge investment that they're willing to make in partnership with our business office. We're doing some professional development. Our literacy coaches have all committed to working with these teachers and making sure that they have the support that they need. Our principals are thinking through how we're gonna schedule third graders next year because that group of kids needs our help right now. And so I think that little example kind of tells you we're gonna use our resources and we're gonna use them well. We're gonna have clarity amongst ourselves and we're gonna engage the teachers in the process. We're gonna have a good, healthy debate and some good, healthy conflict when we get together for this 2-day literacy summit. And when we're done, we're gonna have a plan, and that plan is gonna have checkpoints throughout the year. And we're gonna go back and we're gonna revisit those checkpoints and make sure that we're on target and where we wanna go. Now, in the event that I'm here with you, I will leave that to, that's well-defined, and whoever takes over for me is gonna be able to pick that up and continue that work. But that's something that we're really excited about, and I think something that's gonna help us close that gap even farther as an example of some work that we're doing.
Great, thank you. 15, please give us examples of educational change or reform you have initiated in your career that have led to improvements in student learning.
I should have paced myself better, right?
That's okay. You did kind of address that in the last question, but if there's other things that you'd like to highlight.
Sure. We went through, I think a challenge that we have right now is that I talked about elementary literacy, I talked about early childhood, so let's go in a completely different direction. Let's talk about secondary math, which is a huge challenge for most school systems. So we engaged our teachers in a math committee to start talking through the challenges we were seeing in middle school specifically. because what we saw was a pretty significant drop as kids entered middle school, and then they just kind of hovered. And so we engaged our teachers to say, you know, what could we be doing better, or what could we be doing differently? And what it led us to is really going back and investing our time and energy into the math standards, right? What are the state standards for math? And do we have total clarity around what exactly kids need to know and be able to do as a result of that? And that conversation, it's early yet. We're still growing that conversation, but overall, we've started to see some trend lines in the right way on math, and I think it's going to continue. We just made a recommendation for some new resources that our committee's really excited about. And again, it's that same idea. We've engaged our teachers. We've done a deep study on what our curriculum actually says and what the state standards actually say, and now we've branched off into resources, and I think that that's all going to work really, really well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. How would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high-quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
I mentioned it in the outset. We have 21 career technical education programs in our district, and they're all exceptional. And every year when we kick off the kindergarten recruiting season, I give this presentation to the incoming kindergarten parents, and I tell them that my goal as the chief academic officer is to ensure that wherever you're going post-high school, we have a program that will help you get there. So whatever that looks like for your family, that's not for us to determine. So we have kids, and there are kids here that, you know, they're gonna graduate, go to a four-year university and enter the workforce. We have kids that are gonna graduate, go to college, go to some kind of post-grad, you know, and study something. And then we have some kids that might take over their family business. And that's all good with me. I think our goal as a system, and my goal as your superintendent, is gonna be when we get to graduation and you're handing out the diplomas and I'm shaking hands with the kids, that I'm gonna know that we did our level best to ensure that wherever they want to go when they're done with us on that day, we've at least offered them an opportunity to try to get on that track and get ready for it. So I think it's about the programs that we offer. I think that's the first step in the progression. But I also think that it's not just the programs we offer. I think it's the things that we value and that we honor as a system. So in our district, we absolutely have college signing day where we cheer and shake hands and provide accolades for kids that are heading to pursue one university or another, right? I am so thrilled that the girl who spoke at Warren Mott's graduation has been accepted to Michigan and is going to go there, and she's going to be in Ann Arbor. But we also recognize, value, and appreciate the achievements of our robotics kids, who are going to design incredible things in the 21st century. And we also honor, recognize, and appreciate our HOSA kids who won an award at their competition a couple of months ago. And we make sure that we honor all of those kids. We make sure that we reward and that we praise and that we encourage everybody. I was just as enthused and just as excited to shake hands with the student that was the student of the year for our welding program as I was that young lady that I just talked about that's going to Michigan in the fall. So it's not only the opportunities that we provide, it's what we as a system honor, recognize, and support. Because if you're the kiddo that's studying welding, there's a lot of opportunities out there for you right now. And we want to make sure that we pat you on the back and we provide you the encouragement that you need to keep going. And I think those two things are really how you get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the biggest risk you have taken to do what's right for children?
Oh, Miss Murphy. So
Sorry,
many.
I keep redundant, but
You know, I think that the early childhood program was a pretty big risk because that was a big gamble for the system. I think that was the right thing to do. I think there's always a risk when you put yourself out there and say to the professionals, like, what do you think we could be doing better, right? You know, what if they say the problem is you, right? I mean, that's, you know, there's a risk there. So I think that for me, you know, there's been a whole host of risks that I've taken over the years. We really saw a dip. We really saw a dip and a misidentification in the kids that we were identifying for our early college program. So we have a dual enrollment option for kids, and we have an early college and Macomb program. So the Early College of Macomb program is primarily for kids that want to pursue an associate's degree. The dual enrollment is really for kids that want to go to a four-year university, okay? And so taking the risk of going to the school counselors and the school communities and being honest with them and saying, we have kids in early college that really, that's not a good fit for them. Because ultimately, what we were finding is, in some cases, places like Lawrence Tech weren't taking those early college credits. So we had kids sitting in classes and it really wasn't benefiting them. And so going to our staff and going to the parents of those kids who had just invested time and energy into this and being honest with them, talk about a risk. But it was the right thing to do for those kids, because if we're misidentifying you or if we're putting you in the wrong place, then that's us not doing the right thing for you. And nobody was doing anything wrong. I want to be clear about that. I'm not here telling you our employees are doing anything bad. I just think that there was a lack of clarity around this issue, and that lack of clarity allowed us to misidentify some kids. And I had to go be the one to be honest with them and say, let's do a better job with this. We've done a better job with it. And now the kids who just graduated from Early College of Macomb a few weeks ago, they are the right kids who that is what they want to do. And our dual enrollment population has risen for our college-bound kids, and that was the right thing to do for those kids across our system.
Thank you. Just one more from me. What do you believe are currently the biggest challenges with special education in our region, and how should these challenges be addressed?
I think one of the biggest challenges in my capacity working with our special education supervisors, I think that we overassess our special education students. And I think it takes some of the fun out of their experience. I really do. Because the need to collect data, I'm not saying it's not important, and I am saying that we should be collecting data and measuring IEP goals. I believe in that. But I also think that when you're in middle school and you come to school and you go to your 4 core classes and then you go to your special education teacher for the other 2 and you don't get to go to art because of all the assessments that we have to give you and all of the work that we have to do to track your IEP goals, that is a bummer. And I put myself in the shoes of that 12-year-old little boy who wants nothing more than to go to gym class. And I empathize with him so much. And I think to myself, and I push on our supervisors all the time to think about how can we do this better? Because there's got to be a way that we can collect the data that we need in a meaningful way that can inform the IEP process, but also gives kids that have IEPs the opportunity to just be like their grade level peers and go to a class that they just want to be in just to enjoy a little bit. And I think that's one of the things that we need to get better at as a system, because I agree with all of it. I see the rationale for it, but I just believe with every fiber of my being that there's got to be a better way. Because I cannot imagine saying to my daughter that she couldn't go to art class. It's her favorite period of the day, right? She's so talented and so gifted. And I think about, we put parents in a position where they have to tell their children, well, I'm sorry, but art's really not an option for you. And that breaks my heart. And I think that that is something that we could do a much better job of.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give you a break for a little water.
Oh,
We are going to
thanks.
have Trustee Roney up next.
Comes to the fun part, finances.
Okay.
Question number 19, please describe your experience with budget development and financial management. What is the largest budget you've built and maintained?
So my role, I oversee somewhere between a $3 and a $4 million budget. I work with our business office. I came in a few weeks before our chief financial officer got started. So she and I kind of started at about the same time. And when we got there, we had to change the budget procedures, and I had to help with that because I supervise the budget owners, if that makes sense. So I don't supervise necessarily all of the budgets, but I supervise most of the people who supervise the budgets. And so we had to go to work as a team to figure out a better way, not only to figure out and predict what our final budget should look like in June, but also do a better job building the next year's budget. And so what we started was a system, we really begin in about January, and it begins with our assumptions and our projections. And so we go through and we really have some good conversations about, what do we expect our enrollment projection to be? Well, I'm pretty critical because I work with the student service office, so I'm one of the people that's part of that process. And then once we know what our enrollment's gonna look like, we try to figure out, how does our teaching staff, how does that number mesh with the student number we have? And then we get into a whole host of assumptions. And this year, inflation is obviously a big issue for us right now. Federal funding is kind of a question mark. We don't actually have a budget number yet, and we usually don't have a budget number at this time of year. So we're kind of doing our level best to say, which one do you think we should pick as we try to build next year's budget? So we we start with enrollment, and then we get into staffing, and then we work through our assumptions, and then we go to work on communicating. So we start communicating with our board and with our unions and with everybody to try to help them understand, our leaders and our administrators, to help them understand where we think we're gonna end up, what we think our finances are gonna look like, and how that process is gonna go. And we just go through the cycle and go through the cycle, and on it goes.
Thank you. Number 20, how would you ensure we maintain a balanced budget that aligns our spending with our priorities?
Well, I think the priority part will come out when we study and when we work together, right? Because, certainly, teachers in the classroom is obviously a high priority, but then there are some things that I don't know yet. So we're gonna work together to identify what those priorities are, and for me to understand what those priorities are. I come from a really little town in northern Macomb County called Richmond, and we have this little building called the Auditorium. It was built during the Depression, and it's where everybody starts playing sports. And the auditorium is this revered place for us. And I don't know what the odd is here in Novi, but I'm sure it exists. And whatever that thing is, I don't know what it is yet, but I'm gonna find out. And so finding out what those community treasures are and doing my best to protect them, that's gonna be really important for me and gonna be really important to know. And then I think the other piece of it, in addition to identifying that, I think is also communicating, right? Because I think, you as a board deserve to know, this is how much, if we maintain this is how much it costs. A less expensive option might look like this, but this is what you're gonna have to give up. And really kind of working that through with you and understanding what the priorities of the system are and understanding what your priorities are, and then making all of that fit together, I think is gonna be pretty important work.
Okay. 21, what opportunities do you believe budget limitations present?
I shared a little bit with.
Wait, I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I got too excited.
It's okay.
John's gonna shun me for a minute when we're done here.
In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
Sure. I think, how do we maintain programs for kids? Because that's something that we, in Warren Con, we've gone through the very, very, very unpopular. I was on a team that closed an elementary school. Very unpopular. I talked about the early childhood center. We've shifted some boundaries around for our middle schools. You want to mess with a group of people, send them to a different school. That's a heavy lift. But the reason that we did that was not. It wasn't because we wanted to, it was because it was the only way to maintain the programs for all kids across the system. If you want to bus kids, if you want kids to be able to qualify for transportation from transitional kindergarten through 12th grade, there's a cost to that. So we have to think about our footprint in terms of how many kids are in our schools, right? And so for me, the starting point is, how do we maintain and protect programs for kids? I alluded to this when we got into the conversation about negotiations a few minutes ago, and that is, how do we retain our staff, right? There's exceptional teachers working in Novi, right? They're a major point of pride for your system. Otherwise, they wouldn't take up so much space on your website and your social media footprint and everywhere else, right? And so how do we maintain and how do we retain our teachers? Because ultimately, they're not gonna get you're a teacher discount on their mortgage payment every month. So we've gotta be thinking about, how do we maintain programs for kids and how do we retain our staff? Those are gonna be 2 of the biggest focus areas for me when we start to get into those conversations about limited resources. Now, you've been really fortunate. Your enrollment is is incredibly stable, especially in the state as it stands right now. You know, that you're a rare case where your enrollment since 2012 has hovered between 6,300 and 6,900, right? And so your ability to maintain your enrollment, I think, has probably put you in a pretty good position. You know, you're a hold harmless district, we're a hold harmless district, which is a good thing, but it also limits, you know, because you don't get that 2 times formula that the governor has been using for the past few years. But I think that, you know, you're in a really good position right now as a system, at least based on the records that I reviewed as I got prepared for tonight.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Trustee Smith.
Last 2 questions, John.
Okay.
How would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate and necessary?
I think if you came to visit our district and talked to our 36 principals and assistant principals, they would tell you that I care very deeply about them. And because I care very deeply about them, I have an incredibly high standard for them and an incredibly high standard for myself. And so I will tell you that I pride myself on knowing our administrators, on knowing their families, on making sure that they can be where they need to be when they need to be there. You know, I'm known to stay in contact with our administrators when I know that they have something going on at home, or, you know, just checking in on them and making sure that everything is okay. So I respect them as people, and I care deeply about them. And I think that they would tell you that I value each and every one of them as people. But I think that valuing them as people also comes with an expectation that they're doing their best work. And if you really care about somebody and you see that they're not doing their best work, then it's your job to tell them that. And it's your job, and not in an accusatory or, you know, I don't yell at anyone, but, you know, I can tell you that I pulled one of our leaders aside not too long ago and said to him very seriously, you know, you're better than this. And he agreed. He said, you know what, I am. And that night he texted me and thanked me for caring enough to tell him the truth, because he is better than that. Another one of our leaders I recently had a conversation with and said, you know, it's your job to set the standard. And he called me later that day and said, you're right. And how can I do that? And we met and had a really good conversation. And then on the other side of it, when I see somebody who is doing their best work, I praise it. When I see somebody who is putting themselves out there or taking a risk, and I know that that's happening, I make sure to call that person and tell them, you know, I am so proud of the work that you just did on this or that. You know, we have some exceptional leaders, and some of them are young. And I think that the relationship that I have with them is twofold. I care very, very deeply about all of them as people. But I also, because I care about all of them deeply as people, I expect them to do their best work.
Thank you. How would you assess the current culture and climate of our district, and what would you do to positively impact it?
Well, I think it's about, when I come in, it's about listening and learning, right? And I think it's about really hearing directly from everybody back to those 3 central questions. Where are we good? Where do we need to grow? And what do you need from me? That's going to give me a pretty good window into the culture of this place. And I'm going to be able to come back and report that to you. I can tell you from the look that I have, you know, following your website, reading your minutes, you know, watching some of your meetings, and just kind of doing my level best to get to know you early on, it seems to me you have a very healthy culture here. It seems to me that the board wants what's best for the schools. You seem to have a very engaged and involved staff. You seem to have an incredible parent community that has been incredibly supportive of you. So it seems like the culture is strong here. I'll be able to get more specific with you as I get started and as I listen and learn more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President, back to you.
Thank you. We would like to take a few minutes now to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for the board. And then this is also twofold, just so that you don't feel like just so you can wrap things up together. We also have some time remaining, as you can see up there. And is there anything you want to add at the end of that for your closing statements? So you can ask the board questions, and then we'll go into the closing statements.
Sure. I really only came with one question tonight, and that is, today is June 13th, 2022. Where does the board hope to be on June 13th, 2023?
With our top administrative cabinet full.
Okay, all right. I think I can help with that.
Yeah, I would say a full staff and some progress in a lot of areas. We have high expectations too.
Good. Okay.
So,
I could add that I certainly would like to see this community and the school district feeling unified and feeling like we're all on the same bus. I don't know if that's appropriate, but we're all on the same bus and really just focused on doing what's best for kids. That we've looked at some data and used data-driven research and information that's being provided by our administrative team, by our parents, by our staff members and stakeholders in our community, so that we are all just moving in a forward direction together to do what's best for kids, and that we're feeling really comfortable going into next summer.
Okay, excellent.
Any other comments? Okay. So we'll give you an opportunity then to share any closing, anything you'd like to add.
Well, it's getting late, and you've got 3 more nights. So people that work with me closely will tell you that I have an appreciation for brevity. So I do want to thank you for the opportunity. I want to underscore once again, I'm just so honored to be one of the candidates that you would invite to come here. You are an exceptional school system with an exceptional story and track record and reputation, and the opportunity to sit here with you and do this tonight is just such a thrill. And so I hope I come back here, and I hope that I have the opportunity to talk with you again. I've talked about my mentors at one point or another tonight and how lucky I've been, but if I don't make it back, I would kick myself sitting here at this table to not tell you. Before I was a chief academic officer, I was a principal, and before I was a principal, I was an assistant principal, and before I was an assistant principal, I was a teacher. But before I was a teacher, my first job in our profession, I was a school custodian when I was in college. And as a 19-year-old custodian, I learned lessons from people like Michelle Alexander and Kathy DuPont and Ed Miller and Pat Lukasavich and An Nong and so many others about work ethic and about preparation and about attention to detail. And when you're a school custodian, you got to show up every day and do a great job of doing your job so that the schools are ready. And as I think about getting ready to be superintendent, I think about all those skills I learned. And so I can't let this moment pass sitting at the table with one of the top school district boards in the whole state of Michigan and not give a wink and a nod to the custodians who shaped me into the professional that I am, because they took a 19-year-old kid who was a little bit rough around the edges and smoothed them out quite a bit. And they're all gone into retirement now, but they changed my life. And so I wanted to take this last moment and thank them, in addition to all my other mentors that I talked with tonight. And I want to thank you. Best of luck with your search. I'm going to bring you some materials and shake hands with you one more time. And then I'm going to get you out of here 18 minutes and 52 seconds early, because I'm sure you want to get home too. You got a long week ahead of you, okay? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to wrap up, and then you can hand those around. We just want to appreciate your interest in this position for superintendent for Novi Community School District. The board is interviewing 7 candidates, as you may or may not know, this week. We will let you know Thursday evening where you stand in our search process. So thank you for participating tonight, and we look forward to getting your plan.
All right.